brain is exploding. Just had John Huntington on for episode 294, and God, that guy has a lot of information in his brain. And so, fun podcast. We talked about photography, we talked about school, we talked about theater, we talked about music, we talked about AI, of course, we talked about so many different things. And it's 2 hours. There's a ton of information, and I think you'll find it valuable. So please enjoy. And if you don't enjoy it, tell Sarah, don't tell me. Well, hello, and thank you for coming in here today to join me for Geese of Gear episode number 294. This episode is brought to you by AVL Media Group. AVL is one of the leading distributors of professional audio, video, and lighting equipment in North America. Please take a moment and watch the following video with me.
AVL Media Group is an award-winning distribution company that has been established for over 25 years as a trusted brand in the professional audio, video, and lighting markets. Our new state-of-the-art facility includes a beautiful showroom space that is available for demonstrations, training, and special events. This grants us the opportunity to share our knowledge and provide a unique hands-on experience to all our clients. Our large warehouse facilities, both in Canada and the US, allow us to keep a vast inventory of all the brands we distribute. We can get you what you need when you need it. Our first-class team of industry professionals is focused on delivering outstanding pre- and post-sale service and support to all our clients, ensuring mutually successful partnerships and long-term growth. AVL Media Group, your premier North American distribution partner.
And episode number 294 is also brought to you by GearSource, founded in 2002 with a mission to support live event businesses to buy and sell gear globally. Since that time, the company has transacted in more than 100 countries, selling $250 million in sound, lighting, staging, and video gear. GearSource continues to evolve the platform for huge global growth, enabling localized currencies, payments held in escrow to protect buyers and sellers, AI-powered logistics behind a new global logistics brand, which is called Gear Moves, and more. The company has just released massive new features, including Gear Sync and the ability to manage up to 400 listings at once, plus Need Zone, an automated shopping assistant for hard-to-find items. And there's some big stuff coming soon, too, I will tell you. Take full control over your gear with a visit to GearSource.com today. Hello, and thanks for coming. Appreciate you being here. And just because I will forget at the end, please remember to like and subscribe and comment and share and all of those things, because it is you and those actions that help us to grow this podcast. We're very appreciative not only to our sponsors, but to you, our listeners. So please like, subscribe, share these podcasts. And the funny thing is, it's amazing when I find out how many people there are out there that we haven't reached yet. I talk to people constantly, and I see people forward the podcast constantly to someone else who hadn't heard it. And actually, today's guest, which I'll tell you about in a few minutes, is one of those people. Somebody shared the podcast with him and said, "Hey, you might want to check this out. You'll know some of these people that are on it." And he said he's been on a binge ever since. He's listened to every episode, has enjoyed most of them, and is probably entirely sick of my voice. So this podcast today might push him over the limit, and he may say, "I never want to hear Geese of Gear again." I don't think so. I think we're going to have a great talk today. So as I talk to you, NAMM just happened last weekend, and with that, the Parnellis. And so one of the cool things is the Parnelli Awards were filled with Geezer's guests, former guests on our show, including the MC and host himself, Marshall Bissett. Marshall was a guest on Geese of Gear and hopefully will be again, because I really like the guy and I think he's got an incredible story and he's a good storyteller and just a nice guy. So, yeah, Marshall was the MC. I think he took a shot at humor a few times, and I don't know if he passed or failed. Maybe you guys can comment and let me know. One of the show's good friends and also my own good friends, Cosmo Wilson, of course, the deserved and incredible recipient of so many awards, but he got the, I believe, Lighting Director of the Year for his work on AC/DC. Very cool. And of course, his acceptance speech, which I've seen through Cosmo's socials, and you can see it if you go on his Facebook or Instagram. But he was very grateful, thanked all the right people, and he's such a humble, great guy, and that's why he has so many friends. And one of my favorites was John Featherstone accepting, again, a very deserved Lighting Designer of the Year award, but he was far, far out of town and outside of the country with his great client and good friend, Hans Zimmer, who did a pretty funny thing. They put a skit together, the two of them, and Hans was pretending that he was John Featherstone accepting the award. And again, go check that out on John Featherstone's Facebook page. It's really funny and well worth the watch. But congratulations, John. One of the industry's most talented, but also most incredibly humble and kind individuals. Just a super kind person. Former Leading Ladies guest and a good friend of my, I won't call her my co-host because she hosts another part of our podcast called Leading Ladies, but Sarah, our producer, is good friends with Colleen Wittenberg, and Colleen got Video Director of the Year. That's a huge, huge accomplishment, and congratulations to Colleen. Again, from what I'm told, and I don't know you very well, except for what I heard on this podcast, but supposedly very well deserved, and you're a great person and all of that stuff. So congratulations to you. Roy Bickle, who officially has never been on the podcast, but will be soon, and but was part of the Dining with Dinosaurs thing. Roy won the Visionary Award. And, you know, speaking of visionaries, he's one of the originals, being the godfather of rock and roll rigging. And so congratulations to Roy. And also, I think Upstaging won for Trucking Company of the Year, as I think they win almost every year. They're like a write-in on that one. And so, yeah, lots and lots of other companies who we're very friendly with, but maybe haven't been guests on our show yet. But Sarah, get on it. Look at that list and find those people that haven't been on yet. And congratulations to everyone. You know, honestly, my personal feelings aside towards some of the management or ownership of the company, I think that these guys do a great job of putting on the Parnellis every year. It really has become one of the, if not the sort of pinnacle awards show for our industry. And so I'm grateful for the work and effort that they put on and for the product that they've built. However, I do have a disagreement with the fact that it's at NAMM, and so do most of the people who go to it. I heard from probably 20 people prior to the Parnellis, I can't believe we have to go here every year. It's so stupid. You know, NAMM is not our show. And as much fun as it is to walk around and say hello to artists you know or people you might know that don't really have a lot to do with what you're doing, I just think there's a harder business case to be made for being at NAMM when you're in our industry, whether you're a sound or lighting company or certainly if you're a production manager, a manager, a lighting designer. You know, there's just less and less reasons to be at NAMM. I know that NAMM have worked very hard to try to bring the lighting community into it and the professional sound community into it, where I think they've had a little better success, but it's just not our show. And the other thing is, it's almost like music messa in Europe has always been, where we're a small part of the show and you got to deal with a huge audience, very difficult to get hotel rooms, expensive rental cars, tough flights, all of that stuff to be at that show, versus like LDI or Infocom, specifically LDI, ISE, the shows where they are very much our shows. You know, we're their target audience. And those are the shows where I think we should have these types of events. So I know there's some, I believe, personal feelings between PLSN's owner, founder, and or not PLSN, PLSN, who own the Parnelli Awards, but there's some animosity there, I guess you would call it, or issues between him and LDI. I'd love to see that worked out, and I'd like to see the Parnellis back at LDI. I think that's where it belongs. That way I can go to it, because I'm not going to go to NAMM just to go to the Parnellis. And I think a lot more other people in the industry would like to go as well. So, yeah, that's just my personal feeling. Other people can comment on your own, I guess. And my one AI thing today that I wanted to talk about is as I record this, very recent news is a Chinese company called DeepSeek has started up. They actually started a couple years ago, I think, but they've just really launched in a pretty big way and launched their latest product. They are an AI competitor to like the ChatGPTs and Groks and Claude and all the other companies out there. And apparently it works very well. I haven't used it. I've used it in the background on products like Perplexity, but I haven't used it directly. Like, I haven't gone on to their app and got the look and feel of it all. But their claim to fame is basically that they use roughly 85 or 90% less processing power. And if you've been paying attention to AI, the biggest cost, the biggest challenge, the biggest growth inhibitor is the processing, the compute power. And so they're roughly 90% less compute to do the same thing. So basically they can, in layman's terms, they can do the same thing as ChatGPT, but at roughly, 70, 80% less cost, 90% less compute power, which also means they're not competing with other companies over this compute. And so that is remarkable. And that's obviously probably going to be the tipping point for a bit of a revolution on how things are done in AI. I'm guessing there's some IP there, and it'll be hard for other companies to copy, but I'm sure that other companies are now going to have to become as efficient as them. This is going to be one of those moments that matters when it comes to, wow, that was the point where AI got a lot cheaper and a lot easier, was when this company DeepSeek came out with their product. And so the immediate impact is that my wonderful shares in NVIDIA dropped by 17% virtually instantly. And some predict that it's going to tank, that stock could do much, much worse. And by the way, I'm not giving stock advice, so don't buy or sell based on anything I'm telling you. I'm just an idiot talking shit. But my stock did drop. I don't own a lot of it. I don't own a lot of any stock. I'm just not a stock guy. But the stock price did drop, and it dropped based on the fact that, NVIDIA has been basically ramping up all their production and their ability to build more and more of these devices to power a much larger footprint for these AI companies. And all of these AI companies, Google and OpenAI, ChatGPT, and Claude, and all of these businesses really have been investing massively in infrastructure, which now they may not need, or at least they don't need 80% or 85% of it, potentially, if this continues going down this path. So we'll see, but it's a very big thing to watch, this DeepSeek. what a terrible name. It's hard for Americans to say. Maybe in China, where this company comes from, it's easier to say, but I keep wanting to say deep fake or deep sake or deep stuff, but not deep seek. Sorry, I got a bit of a allergy thing going today, so you're going to hear me sniffle a bit. So anyways, it's a big deal, and we should all be paying attention. And as a funny side note, I asked ChatGPT specifically, this is exactly what I asked, what is DeepSeek and why is everyone freaking out? And so I'm using the paid model of ChatGPT. I'm not using a free one. And I'm using O1, which is their latest. And so the response that it gave me back, and I took a screenshot because it's crazy, is that it thought for 17 seconds. And the answer that it finally gave me was, I don't know. And this is crazy because Perplexity, which is one of the competitors to ChatGPT, gave me a very long, very thorough response telling me exactly who DeepSeek was, the good, the bad, the ugly, and everything in between. And so I don't know if this has to do with bias or with the fact that maybe ChatGPT is getting their ass kicked a little bit right now by this new competitor. They're just a little hostile about it. I don't know what it was, but I used Perplexity. I got a very long answer. Apparently, Perplexity also has a partnership with DeepSeek, where DeepSeek is one of the AI models that feeds it with its responses. And but interesting, definitely something that I found to be pretty interesting. I'm guessing that by the end of today, that will be different. And so if you go on ChatGPT and search the same thing, you might get a much better result than I did, but that's what I got. So anyway, today's guest, John Huntington, is an entertainment technology expert, educator, author, and photographer with over 3 decades of experience in show control, sound, and networking systems. Holding an MFA from Yale School of Drama and a BFA from Ithaca College, he has worked as a tenured professor at NYC College of Technology, systems engineer for major productions, and consultant on projects like Blue Man Group and NikeTown. A prolific author, his books include Show Networks and Control Systems, which I did look into, and industry staples. Now a Professor Emeritus, which I probably say wrong because I've never been one. He continues to shape the field through consulting, writing, and photography. So this guy's smart is what I get from all of that. But also very interesting. I looked into a lot of his stuff, his photography sites, his just a lot of his stuff, and this guy's done some incredible things. So I'm pretty excited to welcome John Huntington to the podcast. John, how are you?
Good. Thanks so much for having me on.
Happy Tuesday. Is it Tuesday?
Well, I've lost track.
Sarah just changed up our recording schedule. It used to be Wednesdays and Thursdays. Now it's Tuesdays and Wednesdays. So it completely screws up my whole week. I don't even know where I'm at. I appreciate you coming on and doing this. So you're one of the few people that I didn't know prior to this. And I always really enjoy sort of getting to know someone as I'm doing the podcast, as opposed to I already know all of where all your bodies are buried and stuff, and you're just coming on to confess to the rest of the world. So yeah, this is going to be interesting, and just reviewing. First of all, so everyone knows, John sent us an email a month ago or so, and just told us a whole big long story in this email, and shared some books with us and all kinds of stuff that he'd done. And then he says, by the way, for the podcast to be a guest, I nominate me. And so that got Sarah's attention, and they got into conversation. And so here we are. I'm glad you were able to come on and do this.
Yeah, and I figure we must have met at some point because I remember you telling, and somehow I missed this whole podcast during the pandemic.
Yeah.
But I remember you telling a story about the, I think it was the Martin party with Casey and the Sunshine Band.
Yeah.
And I think I was working for LDI or Lighting Dimensions back then. And I remember being at that party And I was sort of
Oh,
around, and I think you must have come to production arts when I was working there too. So,
yeah. Well, actually, newsflash, Mr. Steve Terry's coming on very soon
oh,
too.
great.
So we've been talking about him coming on and doing it. So
Oh,
that should
yeah.
be fun as well. I've always just had such a high degree of respect for that company,
Yeah.
not only because they were one of the original, like call it integrators or whatever, but just because of how well they did everything they did, you
Yeah. And
know?
I think everybody I worked, sadly, this guy Mike Way just passed away recently, but and he was younger than, well, he's a little bit older than me, I guess. But everybody from the group that I worked there in sometime in the 90s for a few years, and every single person I think I work with in that group is still in the industry somewhere, and they're
Oh,
all,
that's cool.
and that was, Steve and John McGraw that ran that place, and I worked
Yeah.
in Steve's group, and
Yeah.
yeah, it was an amazing place to work. And I think I was lucky both there and my whole career. I think I was lucky in just being in the industry at a time where there's like a lot of cool stuff happening, and just,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah. Well, and again, going through your pictures and stuff, the evolution that you've seen in all kinds of different things, which we'll talk about. But back to production arts, like just I remember the very first time I went there was probably 92 or 3 or something. And just looking around in the white spotless floors and just like the place seemed more like a medical lab than a lighting shop. It
you
was
must have
just
been in the New Jersey office and
I
not in.
was, yeah.
Okay, you weren't in
Yeah.
the 11th Avenue. It wasn't,
No,
because I
this
started working at when it was still in Manhattan
yeah.
on 11th Avenue, and it wasn't spotless then. I mean, it was
Yeah.
very well kept, but it's just an old building,
Yeah.
which of course
Yeah.
later got turned into a data center. Like
Yeah.
now I think it's a luxury apartments or something.
Yeah.
But
No, this was maybe even later, like maybe 94,
yeah,
95, probably not long before they were acquired. And it was spotless. Like it
yeah,
literally was probably the cleanest shop I had ever been in. And just, how intense that company was about just everything being so good. Your cat's very active on your
yeah.
desk.
I know. And we woke her up from her nap. So
Well, shame on us.
yeah,
How dare we do a podcast in the
that's right.
middle of her nap? Um, so yeah, I mean, I don't even know where to start with you. You've done so many things. It's wild. So you went to college.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think I started because my first concert was Led Zeppelin, and that was my dream as a kid. That was to go on tour with a band like that. And it's
Wow.
funny that in my high school you had to do like a senior project, and I wrote to Shoko, and I wanted to be an intern there, and I got a rejection letter. I was 16 or whatever. And
Yeah.
then years later, I posted that on Facebook, and the woman who signed the letter was actually on Facebook, and now
Oh,
she's like
wow.
my friend. She's retired somewhere in Florida. But yeah, it's just funny, small world.
Yeah.
And in those days, that was, theater school was only the option. So I went to Ithaca College and did a lot of interesting stuff. I don't know. I can just keep
Yeah.
going if you want.
Go. Yeah. Go.
And
Riff away.
we just had a really interesting group where we were, I think we went to, it was my first USITT, and I'm terrible at dates, so I'm probably gonna get these wrong, but like 1984, a bunch of us drove down to Orlando from Ithaca, and did the usual college student thing. But that was like the first time, like we brought back all this information about theater safety and dry pigment paint and electrical stuff, and I remember it was just just to kind of talk about the time that was there. Like I set up a tour. There was NCR cash register factory across from the school, and I set up a tour to go look at their CAD system, which was like $100,000, thing with like a light pen and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's that we didn't have any of that stuff, but we were starting to see it. And then I did a bunch of special effects stuff. And then while we were in school, like we did, and looking back, like it's just amazing we didn't all kill ourselves. The insane things that we did. And then we went on a senior college trip here to New York, and I've been in New York now 35 years, and saw Sunday in the Park with George, and we kind of talked our way, which had this chromaloom in it, which was lasers, and Brand Farron, who I ended up working for, I think he's probably right. He says that's the first image mapping. It was on film, so you can't call it like video mapping, because they did all this pre-rendered stuff and projected on the sphere, and it was pretty crazy. And we kind of like, talked somehow got past the prop guy, mopping the stage after the show. And I wrote down the phone number on the Chromaloom and started calling them up like every week. And I'm like, I want to work for you. I want to work for you. And I always used to tell my students this story. Like, I literally had one more week until graduation, and they kept like, yeah, kid, whatever. And then the last week, they're like, can you weld? And in those days, I was a decent welder. And I'm like, yeah. And I'm like, and so there was a whole lot of stuff that just happened at the shop. And I'm like, they're like, can you start tomorrow? And I'm like, well, I graduate Saturday. How about Monday? So
Hilarious.
I started there. And then I ended up working on with Brand Farron. The company was called Associates and Farron back in those days.
Yeah.
And it was just a crazy time. It was really the end of the mechanical effects era. And like, I went to the Mythbuster shop years later and talked to Jamie Heineman about like, do you ever hear of this place called Associates and Farron? He's like, oh yeah, I applied there. They didn't hire me. So it was
That's
like
wild.
we were in that world because I was watching that show. It's like, that's what our shop was like.
Yeah.
And Brand was just an amazing guy. Just the more geniuses that I've ever been around in my life since then.
Well, he seemed to have done some incredible stuff. Just looking through what you provided to me, he did some incredible stuff. And, and for you to have been a part of that was pretty cool.
Yeah, and I was really just the kid with a soldering iron, willing to go anywhere and work 20 hours a day and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And I was just hired as a welder, and eventually I just went back, and I went back at lunchtime every day and talked to the controls people. And they were like, eventually we worked on this movie called The Manhattan Project, and I'm actually in as an extra operating a laser. And then when that wound up, there was a bunch of layoffs, and I ended up, the guy who was laying everybody off, he was gone, and I was still there. And I stayed there for a few years and got to do Little Shop of Horrors, the other big feature film, did a bunch of feature films. And then we built time code controlled film projectors for Pink Floyd and Roger Waters and Rush, all these people. And doing all that. And again, I ended up like learning a lot about the control systems and stuff. And that's basically like that kind of thing is what I've been doing. One version of that, since then.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was a crazy time. And I'm very fortunate we just got to work on all this incredible stuff.
Yeah. Do you mind if I share some of these pictures?
Oh, sure.
Because I find them to be pretty incredible. I think
people listening on audio won't know what's up. Yeah.
No, people listening on audio won't know much about what we're looking at here. But hang on a sec. Let me just get control over what I'm looking at here. Not that. Okay. Where'd that go? I can't get a hold of the page. That's interesting. 1 second. So yeah, I just wanted to poke around at a few of these pictures because there's some incredible stuff here on John's visual resume. So if anyone wants to actually go to this page and look at this stuff, the URL is controlgeek.net/visual-resume. And so tell us some of this stuff. So this home lighting system first is kind of interesting.
Yeah, so I grew up in a really small town on the Eastern Shore of Maryland, which is it's still pretty isolated. I mean, it's obviously a much different world today. But like I said, I saw Led Zeppelin, and I wanted to do that. And I just sort of like, my mother was getting a master's degree from the University of Maryland across the bay, and I would go over there to the bookstore and like buy the 2 books that were available, and then I just kind of figured it out. So I ended up really, again, all this stuff is incredibly dangerous now, but I made my own little lighting system for my brother's bands and stuff. We would play at the firehouse. And the picture shown now showed the little setup in our garage there.
Yeah.
But the one thing I'll point out, there's 3 flash pots on the bottom that were run on line voltage, which anybody that knows anything should be horrified by. And I was like 15, 14. I had no idea what I was doing.
Well, what's really funny, John? You were just a much smarter version of me.
Yeah.
Because I had the exact same flash pots that were line voltage as well. And we used a little like a high beam switch from a car, like back in the 70s when we had high beam switches. We used a high beam switch as the trigger. And I had a very similar but not as sexy control box as yours, like almost identical, to be perfectly honest, and made up of switchers. And I think same thing. We had like one dimmer.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, it's hilarious how similar this is to what my first lighting rig was.
Well, I just say in the flash spots being in the Eastern Shore of Maryland, we couldn't get any real pyro stuff, but you could easily get black powder. So
that's what we used too.
Yeah. So I was just shooting on black powder and these things. And it was in the, luckily we did the, the dances my brother was playing out and stuff were in the volunteer firehouse. So if we set the thing on fire, which we luckily didn't.
That's hilarious.
They would have just come upstairs and, put it out. But
well, it's kind of funny that they let you do it.
Oh, in the 70s, like everyone was just excited. Nobody really knew any better, I think.
Yeah.
And now, kids today, you could buy all this for $100 on Amazon.
Yeah.
And then the next photo you have up is my first day on the job at Associated Baron.
I thought,
the brand for some reason had a surplus electron microscope in the trailer. So I'm
Who
out
doesn't?
there like, yeah, of course.
Yeah.
The brand bought all this stuff at Los Alamos. So this movie, The Manhattan Project, was about a kid. And again, you wouldn't make this, post 9/11, but it's about a kid who makes a nuclear bomb and brings it to a science fair. It's actually a pretty fun movie. So he went to Los Alamos and bought all the surplus, non-radioactive, stuff. And that's what became the set. So we would just weld it into the set. So like, an electron microscope.
That's
why wouldn't you have
hilarious. Yeah. I mean, all of this stuff, it's just like, what the heck?
Yeah.
You had no idea what you were photographing back then. I mean, or I guess you did, but fast forward to now, it's like, whoa.
Yeah.
All of it.
It's just, I don't know. And I've written, we can talk about this eventually, but in 2019, I wrote a couple articles about how the industry has really kind of matured. And, in these days, really nobody knew what they were doing. So it's like, this is 1980, mid 1980s. So yeah, if you're going to make a set, you just weld it up out of steel in the backyard. This is on East Hampton, Long Island, which is a crazy place to have a scene, special effects scene shop. But that's where Brand grew up. So.
Yeah. I mean, so many incredible pictures in here, but people can go through it on their own because, like you said, this isn't so good on radio. But one of the ones I wanted to get to here, I mean, some of these are just incredible. Like this touring film projector blows my mind.
Yeah, and so this was what's being pictured here is I think that's just, I don't know, remember if that was 70 millimeters or 65 or 35. But yeah, so Brand and the team there, you wanted to put, there was no video projector in those days, was just like how terrible it's going to be. But film projector is pretty good. It was, again, that was a mature technology. So he took like a, big, professional film projector out of a movie theater, but then put it in a frame that actually, he took truck, not air casters, what's it called? Air ride cylinders, like you'd put on a tractor trailer, and mounted the projector on those. And the thing actually in the base of it had a air compressor. And what you would do is when at the end of the night, the end of the show, you deflate these things. The projector would lower down onto these little airbags,
right?
And then ride in the truck that way. And then when you get to the next venue, you run the compressor, you pump it back up because it needs to be stable.
And they survived?
Yeah. And I was on tour with one of these once for an Elvis show, and it went, there was an argument with the electrician, and the whole projector went off the dance floor of the truck. People remember what that was. Like,
wow.
That's like a foot off the thing, just fell down because the guy pulled out of the dock, and it was fine. Things were a little routed up.
Yeah, and then one of the ones I read, this one here was, it was Pink
that's
Floyd,
probably
right?
65 millimeter. So 65 is what you shoot, and 70 millimeters is with the soundtrack on the outside. So that's what's presented, but actually shoot 65. Yeah. So, and then a couple of things that he did was very innovative was, one, these were all synchronized. So you could have multiple projectors. And in those days, I just saw a control panel that I built looking at this. This is like 40 years ago now. So in those days, you would actually just use synchronous motors, and you just line up all the film to the same, like a tab on the gate of the projector. And then you press go and you run them off the same 3-phase AC drive. And then they all come up together. You just can't go too fast. And that way they would stay synchronized.
Wow.
And then, so you could do multiple projectors that way, all frame locked. And then on top of that, then they figured out a way to make these chase time code. So they initially put the time code on the film. And then there's a lot of it's audio turns like wow and flutter in the projector because you have this intermittent and the film is kind of blasting
Right.
around.
Yeah.
So as a timecode source, it's not great, but they figured out. I mean, everybody tried that because you just stick it on the optical track of the film, and then the audio would be like, so it's going
Right.
So that didn't work. So you had to do it the other way around, and they figured out how to do that. It was on an IBM luggable PC, and that thing had like a 7,000 watt xenon lamp in it, and to get those going, that's DC, the lamp voltage in the xenon lamp, but to get it going is like a super high voltage thing to break the arc down. When we would strike the lamp, the computer would just reboot itself, even if it was like 50 feet away. So
That's wild.
but inside the
Wow.
projector is actually a PLC, programmable logic controller, and that thing didn't care. That would just run forever. And that's how that was the first things I was programming. Like, but you draw the ladder logic out on a yellow pad and then type it in like assembler
That
and
is
stuff. So,
wild. That's wild. The other one that really blew my mind was, and I was there for this one, like it wasn't that long ago, but was all this Treasure Island stuff.
yeah.
Because I remember when that hotel opened, like, I was probably there for an LDI show, or I think
Right.
I might have sold some lighting to it or something. I can't remember, but yeah, I remember when this opened, and you look at the pictures now and it's just so long ago,
Oh,
know?
yeah. And
Everything looks different.
Oh, yeah. And you show a picture now looking down the strip, like it's kind of hard to believe. But yeah, just to fill in the gap. So I was at Associates in Farron for 3 years, and then I left there and I went to Yale Drama School because I thought I wanted to be a production manager.
Yeah.
And it turned out I didn't want to be. I ended up doing a lot of sound stuff and continuing to control things. And then my first job was in 1990. My first job in New York was at Theater Crafts and Lighting Dimensions as a technical editor. I think it's the only job I ever got with a resume in my entire career.
Right.
With Pat McKay and Ellen Lampert, who you interviewed. I
Yeah.
learned a lot about her and hers.
Yeah.
And then I was there for a few years, and that was a great job because you can just call up anybody and talk to them about like, oh, what is this thing, And then after that, so one of the people that was an advisor on my thesis from Yale was Steve Terry, who you just mentioned.
Yeah.
And then Steve's like, hey, we got a position for you, and I ended up going out there. And so, and then for Treasure Island, that's when they thought that Vegas thought that they would make it family friendly. So they basically built like a theme park attraction on the front of the hotel.
Yeah.
And it's on, I found a YouTube video, and it's on my blog somewhere, the show, because back in those, people, you have to get a video camera. You can just get on your phone.
Yeah.
I think it was David Hersey was the lighting designer for it.
I don't remember.
Yeah. And so Production Artists got the contract for the whole lighting system. And then I did the show control part of it. And I was also like, was one of the field installation people, like hanging upside down, soldering XLR connectors for DMX and stuff like that. But that was run on an Amiga, Richmond Sound Design. What was the name of their software? Stage Manager. And again, that would take time code in and would spit out. Was that a Copulate Animator, I think, that we used on that? Oh, that was an ETC console. But it would take in SMPTE time code and then spit out MIDI to the console to sync it up with the soundtrack.
Yeah.
And then
that show went every, 15 minutes, 30 minutes?
Yeah, there was a lot of flame in it, and it was very expensive to run. So I think by the end, it ended up sort of fizzling out, but it ran like 4 times a night or something.
Oh, okay.
Because it was a big production that had stunt people in it. And then if you saw the right performance, one of the like high divers was on fire and things like that. So and it was just a simple story, like these pirate ship, which was sails around the corner. They have this big battle. And the British sea captain voice was Steve Wynn, the owner of the casino.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, you can hear him on the
funny.
video. He's not a great voice performer.
No.
But he owned the joint, so.
Yeah.
And then that was Showtech, I think we were subcontracted to, and then that was like they went bankrupt in the middle of the thing. So this was in those days, I think they built these projects by getting somebody, bankrupting them during the show. Construction, and then he'd pay off everybody at 60 cents on a dollar, and that was their sort of discount program for these.
I think like right after it opened, this was probably 92. I was in Vegas with my now ex-wife and proposing to her.
Oh, wow.
And I came up with this whole scheme where I rented a limousine and picked her up at the airport because I was there on business. And right as the volcano was erupting, or was that Mirage? Who had the volcano? That was a Mirage.
It's Steve Wynn also, but yeah, that's Mirage.
Yeah, that was Mirage.
Did that too.
Oh, that was a Mirage, not the Treasure Island. Yeah. Mirage is the one that I proposed to her right as the volcano was erupting, which really kind of was a preview of our marriage.
Oh, no.
Yeah. But
and it's crazy, but it's hard for people. If you go to Vegas now, it's hard to understand the Mirage. That volcano is getting torn out now, right? So it's hard to understand. Like
Treasure Island's gone, or being gone. They haven't imploded it yet, have they? I don't remember.
No, I think it's the last time I was there that the attraction. So it was Buccaneer Bay for 2-3 years or something.
Yeah.
Then it became the Sirens of TI, which was just horrendous. Show designed by committee with, it's just awful. But they had all the infrastructure.
This stuff. Let's do it. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. And then the last time I saw it, it was like a Walgreens and a Senior Frogs was
right. That's what I saw. Yeah. But it's getting gone, and then it's going to be the Hard Rock.
Oh, okay.
The Guitar Hotel.
It's been a year
is going in there. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's happening fairly soon, I believe.
And I was actually there while we were building that thing. They imploded the dunes, so I have some very blurry photos of that thing going down. We watched from the roof of Treasure Island. So
well, and the recent one was the Trop,
right?
And they had the drone show with the pyro on the drones and stuff. That was a pretty cool implosion show. Yeah, it's so wild to see those buildings coming down like that. They're so controlled. Like it's controlled violence in a sense, because they're literally blowing up the entire building, but they do it in a way that none of it leaves that little square of property,
Yeah.
It's pretty wild. So we moved very fast there. Like you got out of school and all of a sudden you're building friggin' pirate shows and stuff. One thing I was wondering is, did you ever wonder how different your career would look had Shoko said yes to that 16-year-old starry-eyed kid?
Well,
You'd be a rock and roll guy.
Well, that's one of the things in that process. So when I was in college, we had touring concerts come through. And so we had like Huey Lewis and Hall & Oates. And it was funny because this was 1983 or 4. And I was a kid pushing road boxes, but I just think fascinating to see the standard of production that's gotten so much higher that like there was no railing on the stage for the Hall & Oates show, and Oates fell off in the middle of the show. Yeah. So you just hear this like clang.
Yeah.
And I was, the sound guy is like, oh, the whole crew thought they were getting fired that night, the whole thing.
Yeah.
But I was around that a lot, and I just realized that, I just didn't enjoy drugs as much as I would have needed to go on the road in those days.
Yeah, it's true.
And I'm also not like, my brain is I really love solving technical problems, but I'm terrible at running shows because I just don't have a memory for like sequences of things. And so those two things like that kept me off the road, I think, in the end. But I ended up being
I would
around
like to mention, just for young kids listening to this now, because we're battling such a perception problem in the concert touring world, where that is still prevalent, and it's not.
It's not the case at all.
Yeah,
no.
the drugs and partying and stuff have definitely, I wouldn't say completely 100% disappeared, but for the most part, it's become much more corporate.
Yeah.
And the perception, I think, still among many people is that it's just a drug-infested party gypsy showdown, and it's just a gypsy life, right? And it's just not true. Like now it's a really great career going on the road with these tours, with great companies that are now, $100 million plus companies and stuff. So it's become much more serious. I don't know if you still would have made the same decision had it been right now, going in and looking at it and going, like, would it still be too messy for you?
No, I think I jump ahead a little bit, but I taught at this college for almost 25 years, and I had a lot of students that went into all different types of touring, and it's a whole other world now.
Yeah.
And I would recommend it. It's also much, much, much higher tech. Because in the 80s, it was really kind of cowboy stuff in terms of the technology.
Yeah.
And now, the the people on the road is like the problems you have to solve and the level of technology and stuff. It's it's way beyond that. So I think it's a much more interesting job in that way now.
Yeah, that's a good point though, is that like I think in the past, most real products from real manufacturers were designed for theater, and most rock and roll stuff was either adapted from theater
Right.
or built in somebody's garage. And I think now that's changed a lot. And now, because theaters keep product for so long, I think rock and roll has become much more sort of the target audience for most of these manufacturers. They're building products to put onto these big mega tours and stuff.
Right. Well, it's a much bigger market. I think that sort of,
it's huge.
Concert and touring and event stuff is when I wrote the couple articles, it's been a few years, but I ran all the numbers, and theater, even though theater dominates sort of the educational side and the idea of it, the money in that industry, I don't know, I'm going to get the number wrong, but let's say it's 15% of the industry. And that's changed a lot.
Yeah.
Also, I think one of the things, again, I feel fortunate to have been in this time, but when I was doing these things with Brand Farron and even at Production Arts to some extent, we were kind of inventing these things, and like these, we build these things, and we built these like film projectors, and we, solder them up over the weekend and send it out and kind of hope it ran. And then over the years, like a lot, and some of the things we did back then, like we had, Brand had figured out how to take a whole bunch of big photo studio strobes and make lightning, simulate lightning. And we would do that. And now that's just, it's just a strobe this fixture and it's done. So there's so many things that in that period from, 80s, and in the article, I argued about 2010 is when this like big maturity point happened.
Yeah.
Where not that there's certainly innovation continues, but, you look at the show in the article I talk about from, Beatles at Shea Stadium to 2010, if you look at that evolution, it's insane.
Yeah.
You look at a show, maybe not the top end Taylor Swift or whatever, but if you look at a standard show from today in 2010, to the audience perspective, it looks pretty much the same.
Yeah. 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 It's more the same. But you're right. I think 2010, I would say, is definitely sort of a maturity point where fixtures had prisms and framing shutters and, different control protocols and all this stuff. And plus, especially with the advent of the LED light engine, when you reduce the heat in those fixtures, you suffered so many less problems. The fixtures became so much more reliable. And I think that reliability crossover was really a significant one because, if you look back to the earliest Verilights where you had to have the curtains up and people constantly working on them, even during the show and stuff, to now where, you hardly ever have to pull a fixture down out of the rig and replace it. It's stuff is just extremely reliable, unless it actually gets dropped on the floor or something, right? But, so, you have an interesting life/career in that it seems like you've literally covered most of the disciplines, like literally theater, architecture, you did some touring, really like teaching, photography, film, television, like you've pretty much done it all, right?
Yeah, and I think part of that, I think I'm fortunate to have come into the industry when I did. And if you're really like me as a sort of, you're in the 80s sometime, I took these aptitude tests because working at brands, I was sort of like, what's my specialty? I'm working with all these like genius specialists. And I'm like, what's my specialty? Took these aptitude tests, like, well, you're a generalist. Like, that's what you do. And so in those days, I think it's still true to an extent
kind
today.
Of what your resume says.
Yeah. That's right.
You are a generalist.
But in those days, you could kind of flip around between the various things a little more. And I think my brain, I'm more of a sound person than anything else. But when sound was all analog, like I just struggled with understanding it to like a deep level. And then I just got very lucky because when everything went digital, like that came into alignment with the way my mind works. So that was rough for some of the older analog kind of brain wiring people. But for me, it moved into where I am. So I would say these days, the last, couple decades, I still around a lot of different things, but I couldn't program lighting console today. You know, I
Really?
could, I mean, I could learn it, but I haven't, you know, once Grand MA came out and we had that at my school and I looked at it, I'm like, okay. And then I never sat down and learned it.
Well, and
But I
that's
can, you
me.
know,
I mean, certainly I'm the same with a Grand MA, but more so with lighting or with audio.
right,
You know, I'm the exact opposite with audio. Like
right,
I grew up playing in bands and I could walk around to the Soundcraft, I think it was called an SR-24 or something, the 24 channel basic
right.
Soundcraft rectangular boring looking console and with a little meter bridge on it, you know, and I could make a band sound good. But today I wouldn't even know how to turn a console on, and I don't
Yeah.
understand Dante, and I don't understand all the plugins, and you know, where's the rack of EQs and reverbs and stuff? Oh, well,
Right.
no, you don't need all that. That's, you know, that's a new plugin or whatever, you know, and I don't get it. Like, and
Yeah, but I would say that the, you know, like a sound console functionally is still, with a few exceptions, is still pretty much the same as it was in the 80s, or maybe not the 80s, but the 90s. It's just that now it's all on a touch screen and buried inside the thing, which is a lot simpler in terms of signal flow and all that.
yeah,
You're not inserting 100, you know, compressors on everything. And so
yeah,
so many, many benefits to it. But there has been, and this is not it's true, I guess, in lighting as well, but in audio and video, there's been this big kind of structural change when we went networking, or everything went network.
yeah,
Because it used to be that you could walk up to an analog sound console. And actually, this is true in lighting back in the 0 to 10 volt days. And you could put your hand on a wire and trace it out and go, oh, this goes over here. It goes to that thing. This is where it goes.
yeah,
And then now with networking, we've like decoupled the signal flow from the physical topology. So
yeah,
now you just plug it all in. It goes to, it's funny, I have network switches sitting behind me. You
yeah,
plug in a network switch, and then the signal flow is all virtual inside the system.
yeah,
And that's been something I saw that, you know, I was teaching through that transition, and I could see, you know, the students, even the ones that never had the analog background, struggle with that as well. So that's a
yeah,
new kind of paradigm. But I
yeah,
think if somebody, you know, you could learn it. I mean, I could learn a Grand MA, but it's so it does a lot more than it used to with like a
yeah,
two-scene preset or a,
yeah.
you know. But I think a sound console is still
I
taking
don't know.
something and, you know, putting some EQ on
Well, to
it,
me, it's a
reverb.
whole different thing. Like, it's just the whole, everything about the whole universe is different.
Right.
But, you know, you mentioned about all the networking, and do you know Chris Chalk? Chris Chalky
No.
Chalk, television, film,
I don't
lighting
think so.
guy. He's Australian, and he does most of his work in LA, so it doesn't surprise me you wouldn't know him. But he's become somewhat of a networking expert on lighting controls, and he's a programmer for movies for the most part. But he said as time went on and networking became a thing, people were just lost. You know, television and movie people were just lost on you know, because like you said, you used to just follow a cable and go, well, that goes to that light and that's broken and that's what I need to change. But now it's, you know, it's a little bit more complicated.
Yeah, it's abstract now.
And so he teaches all kinds of classes to, you know, the union guys out there and stuff, because, you know, they don't understand until they learn, right?
Right.
All this networking stuff. So.
And it's funny because I remember, because I came out of theater school and had worked on some, you know, concerts, and I did sound in the pub at school and things like that.
Yeah.
And then I went, like my, you know, first job working with Brand was on these feature films. And these guys back then, the 80s, like there was one where they, I can't remember which one it was, but they had a very, very simple lighting console, probably electro controls or something like that, ended up on the feature film set. All these guys were terrified of it. Like that, the idea of a cue is like, oh, what, you know, not putting a screen in front of this, because obviously they had color temperature issues, but yeah, it was kind of crazy. And now, like, I have friends who are, you know, lighting experts here that make money doing crazy moving light rigs for, you know, films, even though it might not be a concert scene or something. It's just, they build that.
Well, it's very much an expertise that I don't think everyone has out there, you know, and like, Chris was telling me, you know, there's like 5 top guys and all the biggest movies are after these 5 top, and these guys are just like hog programmers, you know, it's not even the toughest console for the most part. Yeah. Yes. Some of these movies are using MA consoles now and stuff, but you know, from a standpoint of what's going on in concert lighting,
Oh yeah.
it's crazy out there. Like,
Yeah.
the expertise levels of some of these computer operator guys that are now running consoles, it's wild. It's wild.
Yeah, it's a real specialty now. There's people, I mean, I have friends that's what they do. They're moving light programmers. They do all kinds of, big events in New York, and that's their whole career. And it's great, but that's like, I wouldn't have, like I said, I'm a generalist, so I always sort of, I'm interested in lots of different things. So, which is my downfall in some ways, but
that whole programmer being able to make a living, like I remember exactly when that switch flipped. It was basically the Hog 2, when the Hog 2 launched in, whatever it was, 94 or 95, I guess it was. But when the Hog 2 came out, all of a sudden, all these like club kids were getting $250 a day to program Hog 2s. And it just they became the most sought after people, period. Like people were lining up for their services. And I know guys now who are in their late 50s who did very, very well at that time, and just that turned into a career, a very good career,
And now there's the whole EDM world with just the most insane programming you'll ever see.
Wild.
Like I see these things on Instagram and like, wow, it's so I mean that's probably where the cutting edge is these days. They're the ones pushing
EDM.
it.
Yeah. I think you're probably right. Like they seem to be the largest rigs, the most integrated use of video and lighting together. And I think you're probably right. I mean, although you look at some of the country tours that are there now, like it's insane the size of these rigs.
Yeah.
It's really country and rock music and pop music are all using the same rig now, basically. It's all 1,000 moving lights and just loads and loads and loads of gear.
And I think we've seen that, these articles, that's all on my website, people are interested, but we saw even when I was doing these feature films in the 80s, they were using Tweakos for power, which was this welding connector was not rated for the right voltage and had an exposed screw on it. So if you didn't tape over the thing, you just get shocked. And I remember I did a movie called Critical Condition on Governor's Island here in New York. And I was running this big lightning rig and I had like 1,000 amp 3-phase generator powering my lightning rig. And I go to jump on the scaffold for this thing and I was getting blasted. And so the guy, the film electrician, I told him, so he went over and he got like a little piece of metal stake and like a zip cord with 2 clips on it. And that was his ground for the thing.
Jesus.
And I that was where it's good to know about electricity, because I would just jump onto, I would never be part of the circuit. I would jump from the ground onto the thing and I was happy to get off of that. But I mean, these days, all these things, concert touring, film, TV production, the power's all pretty much standardized. And then I think the other fascinating part is the like virtual production stuff where you see, the video walls have gone back from live performance into the virtual production stuff where they're just driving with a gaming engine. And they put some, sensors on the camera to give it the modeling input. And I look back, it's the same kind of idea as we were doing in the 80s, but we had none of this horsepower, But it's all kind of come together in that way.
It really is incredible. And that's, again, it's one of the things I point to when we're talking to younger people who are considering whether or not, they want to be in this part of the industry. And again, you look at the technology that's out there and the amount of it and the size of these shows and stuff, there's nowhere else you're going to get access to that kind of stuff. There just isn't.
And I think I sort of jumping around the timeline here, but when I was at Production Arts in the 90s, I wrote the first edition of my book, which back then was, that's online on my website for free. It's kind of hilarious to look back at it.
What is your website, by the way? Because you keep referring to it.
ControlGeek.net. If you just search my name, you'll find me.
Okay.
But yeah, and there, so that, the first book back in the 90s, anyway, that was much more about like, pin level stuff on DMX, and MIDI was in there. And there was a couple pages on networking and stuff like that. And then that's evolved now. That became this monster 400-page book that, became just kind of out of control, where I renamed it to show networks and control systems.
Yeah.
And then during the pandemic, I was thinking about this for a long time, but I extracted out the networking part of the book into a separate book called Introduction to Show Networking. And the idea of that, and the reason for it is exactly what you're talking about, is the one thing that's common in all this stuff. And I think I would argue there's three things actually, but one thing that's common across all these fields now is networking.
Yeah.
So you don't really need to know, the seventh bit of the MIDI message anymore, because you can Google that if you need it. But it is helpful to know what an IP address is and how the networks work. And so I think there's three sort of technologies that are universal across all these fields now. Networking for data, Ethernet basically for data control, which is not the case in the 90s and 80s. Ethernet existed, but there's other contenders. They're all gone now.
Yeah.
And then I think power is standardized pretty much across everything. I mean, even our, Lex products still up to the military. So it's like the same thing. And then rigging, like those three things have standardized. And I think those are also anything you would do in the future if you're going to invent the thing I always use for what's the sort of disruptive technology, be like the Princess Leia projector from Star Wars, which never existed. It was an optical effect. But if you're going to build one of those, you need to rig it safely. You need to give it power, certainly, and you give it data. How are you going to do that? Ethernet. So that's why these things so if you learn any of those three things, I think the techniques and, between the industries are a little bit different. But, like we had 2 rigging tests and stuff like that, but, for theater and rigging and, but all those things, I helped write the certification exam for the electrical stuff. And, we sat in a room with Broadway electricians and film guys from California and Canada and stuff like that. And it's all the same, and that's where I first heard about like LAN parties and things like that, where you hear these like crazy things, but it's still a bunch of cam locks and some transformers and a bunch of cable. And that stuff is pretty much standardized. So I do think, I don't know if somebody would be able to bounce around as much as I did, but if you're interested and you learn any of these things, I think you have to figure out your way into it, because it's all much bigger than it was.
Yeah.
But it's also like, when I talked about my first USIDT in 1984, there was nobody hiring there. Like if you wanted to work for Cirque du Soleil or whatever, you'd have, well, they didn't exist back then, but those kind of organizations weren't there, and now they recruit at USITT.
Yeah, big time.
The
all of them
cruise
have
ships
tables. All of them have tables at the trade shows.
Yeah.
Even Solotech and PRG and
Sure.
some of the big
Everybody's
rental
looking.
houses and stuff have HR tables at these trade shows. But yeah, I mean, you're right about so many of those things, and again, like you being the generalist that you are, you went to school, you did a bunch of stuff, and then you decided I need to go teach people how to do all this stuff. Is that how that went, or am I missing about 27 steps in there?
Yeah, I think the process, well, what happened along in there, it's funny because like over the years, I can't count how many editions of the books I've done, but I'm down to, I have two books now that I think are good for a while. But none of that stuff was taught to me in either school, and it wasn't their fault. I have a lot, I could talk to you another 2 hours about education.
Yeah.
But and the issues there. But
is the general issue in education just that it takes them a long time to understand what the real world actually needs?
No, it's just that there's no money.
Is that what it is?
Always, yeah. Because you have
but it
lots.
Just seems like on all topics, they're always a bit behind. It's like
that's the nature of any bureaucracy. But but you have a lot of very smart, well-meaning people in there. And it's used to be. I mean, I taught at a public college that but basically, I mean, I early retired because I got tired of fighting it.
Yeah.
And it at all levels of the school was very well-meaning people. My colleagues are great. The students were awesome. But I'm like, I don't have kids. I've been saving money. I don't need to fight this thing anymore. Fortunately, it's getting a little better in terms of that. But
it just feels like to me, and I might be wrong, and you would obviously be more passionate about this too, but I've always felt, because, I left school early and became a business person, and I hire people who come through colleges and all of that stuff. But whether it's business or marketing or any kind of technology or whatever it is, it feels like people are coming out prepared for something that happened 2 years ago, but not for what's happening today.
Right. That's certainly an issue because just the nature of academia is it's a bureaucracy. So
Yeah.
there's nothing, and with a bigger problem, and I wrote an article about this 17 years ago. I mean, again, the school I was at was not like this. So this was City Tech in Brooklyn, and there's
Yeah.
still my college. They replaced me. Fortunately, I wasn't sure they would. Excuse me.
No worries.
The so that school is a school of entertainment technology. So we didn't have any actors or directors in the program. But we're in New York, so we partnered with the Bindlestiff Circus, and there we have endless, awesome variety performers, and I could talk about that forever. But the bigger problem is that, like, most schools that address this industry are conservatory theater programs, and those, again, I wrote about this. I actually I attacked the conservatory model for training technical students, and then actually got an award from USITT for it. So because
that's funny.
what that tells you, though, is the people teaching the technical stuff, they know it, but a lot of those schools are run by directors and theater academic theater people, with PhDs or whatever, they look down on a lot of this stuff. So the technical people are sort of secondary in there, and they get pushed aside. But but I would say our school, a bunch of issues with that. One, a lot of people are like, oh, we want experts in this console or whatever. It's like, well, great. Number one, give us the console because we can't afford it because the budget's been destroyed.
Yeah.
But number two, you're taking somebody off the street that doesn't know anything. And like my school was lots of kids who grew up in the city, and a lot of like first and second generation immigrants that are really just as passionate as I am, but they didn't have, the privilege of going to, I went to boarding school and all these things, and be able to just do whatever I wanted. Like these kids, they got a job, they got to do these things.
Yeah.
So they were just as passionate as I was, but they started with sort of a deficit already. So you have to make up for that in terms of where they're going to get, and then try to teach them stuff. And I think so we would focus on was those fundamentals. Like our school is still one of the only ones that has a networking class in it, because I developed it while I was there. And so I think in those cases, but again, the people, they have to get experience. So you're not going to just step out and have, amazing people right out of school.
Yeah, no matter what, you're going to be catching up a little bit. Yeah. Yeah.
But I think there's a lot of problems with it. And the big picture is that most educational programs are theater based, where theaters, we just talked about, is a tiny part of the market. And I have a thing on my blog about, there's a lot of snobbery in that world. They look down on, rock and roll and circus stuff and all this other things, even though that, that's still going on.
Yeah.
While in the meantime, and all these schools have hundreds of acting students that are never going to work, while you've got, all these technical students that are all going to go and work the rest of their career in the industry, and do really well. So there's a whole lot of problems with it. I could talk about 4 hours.
It almost reminds me of the Back to School, Rodney Dangerfield, the whole thing where he gets up and starts yelling at what's his name, the comedian. Oh my God, what's his name? The guy who yells all the time.
Oh,
I'm
man,
drawing a blank. I've seen him live a couple times. But anyways, he's yelling, that's not how it works in the real world. Here's how it goes. And he just, because he's a business guy, right? So he just kind of goes off on how the real economy works. And it sort of reminds me of a lot of the students that I meet coming out of school. And this isn't saying that anyone's stupid or they're not coming out well-educated or whatever. They're very well-educated, but there's just that piece that's missing. And it seems to be, like I said, they seem to be aimed at something that happened, not at something that's going to happen, Yeah,
I would say in our program, we really focused on like the fundamentals. And like, I think our students come out and they used to, they go right to work for a lot of the companies all around New York, and they go on tour and stuff. So I think the problem is, in our case, the whole school was just got the budget slashed, and we really suffered through COVID and all this. It's very complicated right now. What these are kids that were in high school during COVID, and whatever the issues are with that, that's what they went through, and they got a big situation to come out of that. But I think, and I just went up last week up in Poughkeepsie. There's an old kind of legendary rock and roll venue up there called the Chance Theater, which is an old vaudeville house. And unfortunately, the guy who ran the club for many years, he and his wife, they both died from COVID, and the place
Oh,
kind of went dark after that.
Oof.
But now there's like people in there, and I think I'm going to get the name wrong, but I think it's the Empire Arts Academy or something like that. They're making like a 10-month nonprofit entertainment technology training program. That I think that kind of thing. And again, I think you can do this now because it's a trade.
Yeah.
And if you're motivated, you don't need school for a lot of things now. And
Yeah,
this is
well,
something.
and by the
there's
way,
gonna be
this
a lot
is
of-
not by any stretch a anti-school
Oh, yeah.
discussion, from me, and certainly not from you, who's been a professor for years and years and years. But, I think people do need to recognize when they're just there for the party and
Right.
wasting their parents' money and
Oh,
their
yeah.
time. You need to recognize that and be willing and prepared to step away and use that motivation and find a better way to do it. And I won't say that's exactly where I was, but I just was looking around going, yeah, this ain't me.
Yeah.
And, that was really all that it was. And I wanted to be on the road with a rock band, and that's what I did. And so, yeah, but I mean, certainly when you've got good, smart, passionate teachers like yourself,
No, like,
that's a killer foundation that I think everyone in our industry needs. But it's a funny industry because the
Yeah.
foundation of the industry isn't that. The foundation of the industry is just yahoos who are
Yep.
sitting at a bar and somebody next to them goes, "Hey, you want a gig?
yeah, that's right.
Let's go do this thing. You got to wrap up these cables, carry them from here to over here, and I'll pay you $30."
Right.
Oh, cool. And next thing you know, they're, the lighting designer for the Rolling Stones or
Right.
whatever, I mean, it's just crazy how careers are made in this
But
industry.
But I would say in the big picture, I would predict in the next decade, you're going to see a bunch of colleges are going to close because enrollment's declining, funding's getting slashed everywhere.
Yeah.
And I hear it not just in the public sector, like my school was all publicly funded, which is great because people graduate with no debt and all that. And I also think I wish Americans would do like many people in the world, take a gap year and go do something else,
I
or
agree
go
with that.
work at
100%.
McDonald's or something.
I
Like, I
agree
had
with
a
you
kid-
so much.
Oh yeah, I had a kid at school that just a great guy, and I'm not sure what he's doing today, but I know he's successful. But he worked at the Times Square McDonald's for like 2 years when he was getting out of high school, and he's like, "Should I put that on my resume?" I'm like, "Hell yeah." Because anybody that knows anything, like if you can survive 2 years, even if you've never been to the Times Square McDonald's,
Yeah.
you can envision it.
Yeah.
And, if you can work through that for a couple years,
Yeah.
like you're not going to complain.
You've got
when you're-
tenacity. Yeah,
Yeah.
you're not going to be running to HR
Yep.
4 times a day with
And this
some
kid was
kind of small
super
problem.
passionate, and I think he's first one in his family to go to college and things like that.
Wow,
And
that's
we had-
impressive.
I mean, that's the heartbreaking thing, is we had hundreds of these kids come through, and then it's not, our program was never targeted. It's just that the program just, they've cut and cut and cut and cut to
Yeah.
the point where, like, how do you function? And again, it's cyclic. It was at a bottom before COVID. COVID was really miserable for us. And then now it's sort of on the upswing. Personally, I was too old to like fight that battle anymore.
Yeah,
And we
I
got
get
some
it.
great people in after me. So I'm
Yeah.
very optimistic for it for the long run.
So,
But yeah, it's a different, but I'd say it is a very different world in that. Like, I think if you don't, I mean, it depends on where you want to be, but I think you can, to get a career in this industry. And if you're a self-motivated, self-learner, like you may not need college anymore.
right, yeah.
Or something like
Well,
this.
not even just in our industry, in a lot
Right.
of industries.
Oh, sure.
Like I read and listen to guys all the time talking about hiring coders outside of colleges. They're not
Right.
just going to all of the usual suspects to get their computer coding guys, tech guys and
Right.
stuff. They'd rather see a piece of code that they wrote and go, yeah, that's good. I want
Right.
this person on my team.
Yeah. And I do think
regardless of where they
And
are.
our industry's always been that way. It's
Yeah.
always been, can you get along with people and be a good part of the team? And B, can you do the job? And then your credentials don't really matter after
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
I mean, other than
think so.
safety and, I think the certifications we have now, I think are very important, because those are all, electrical and rigging and stuff is really important. You don't want the Yahoo doesn't have any background in that, but you don't have to, we taught that stuff in my school, but you don't have to go to college to be able to
But
pass
this is
that
all
test.
a bit of a reversal, though, because I think for a long time, maybe it's the 90s and the 2000s, that was it. Like, you get out of high school, you got to go to college. We
Right.
need a college
Oh,
degree.
yeah.
If you don't have a degree on your resume, you're not getting hired by any of these
Right.
companies. And I think that that's been a bit of a reversal now, where companies are much more willing to look past your education at who you are as
Yeah.
an individual.
Yeah,
And
that's a good thing.
what skills do you actually bring? What character do you bring? I know
Yeah.
I do. I couldn't care less what school you went to, or if you went to school. I'm going to read you as a person and what kind of job you can do
Right.
for me, and hire you based on that, not based on your credentials. I don't care about
I'd
your
say
credentials.
for me, this is the 80s, a very different time. But when I went to grad school, it was 3 years in grad school. And my calculation was that was like 10 years in the industry. And then
Yeah.
when I came out, I don't know if that's true today, but when I came out, I worked at Production Arts with people that had been there for like 5 or 6 years. And and again, to me, it was a great experience. I learned a lot, for that. So, again,
I think it
everybody's
still
different with that.
depends on the individual, though,
Oh,
because
yeah,
like
yeah.
some people could go into production arts and get 10 years of schooling in 6 months at production arts.
Right.
Maybe not 6 months, but
Yeah.
18 months or
to-
something, because
you
you
have
do
to
got
do
to
a lot.
get to a
Yeah, you
point
have
of
to
being trusted before you get out of just wrapping cables.
Yeah, yeah. But
Yeah.
you'd also have to be doing every night,
Yeah,
doing reading stuff, watching whatever,
of
learning.
course. Yeah, yeah.
That's the thing to me is I'm still, I'm still go to like industry events. I'm not, at 61, I'm still just as interested in the business I am. I go see, 4 or 5 shows a week. I'm out shooting my friends' bands still, all this stuff. I'm still doing it because that's what I want to do.
Yeah.
And that's and I'm still interested. Like, I'm going next month to the England to see the ABBA Voyage show. Do you know about
Oh,
this
yeah,
thing?
yeah. Very cool. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
it's super
and that's
cool.
like, that's my vacation. I'm gonna, then my friends' band's playing over there. I'm gonna go hang out with them. And like,
That's fun.
I could go to the beach, but I'd rather do that. So, but
Yeah.
that's what I'm interested in. So,
Yeah, good for you. But going back to like the 90s, when you started writing books and then eventually teaching as well, or I don't know which one of those came first or whatever, but did you just suddenly desire to, like, I need to share this knowledge, or was it just that you burned yourself out on the other stuff, or like what was especially writing? Because writing to me is one where not very many writers make money off of it. A very small percentage of writers make money off selling books. So it's more the ability, the mechanism to share knowledge. But how did that all come about? Like, was that just a passion to teach, or?
Yeah, I think, well, a bunch of things happen all at once in there, but so like I said, my first job was, this is the day, this is 1990. I worked with Pat Mackay and, Theater Crafts and Lighting Dimensions. And with the guy, my colleague was Carl Ruling, who went on to be the
I knew Carl, yeah.
Yeah, he's still around. He's on sort of phasing his way out. And it's funny. So Aaron, who's now the executive director of ESTA, was one of my students, and Carl wanted like an assistant. So I sent her over there, and then 5 years later, she's in charge of the whole thing now.
Wow.
So again, there's somebody, I hope she finished her. Yeah, she finished her degree with us, but that's somebody like had been in school and came this thing. And so, so I was at the AES show it was at the Hilton Hotel. This is how small it was. This was 1991 or whatever. And somebody from this publisher came around and said, we're looking for book reviewers. And they filled out this form. Cause I had, I was technical editor, and and I guess cause I'd written at Yale, you have to write a thesis. So that's what I think that was the first big document I wrote like that. And then on the form is like, if you're going to write a book, what would it be on? And I wrote show control. And then they contacted me. And then I was working again, talking about, like, I think passion to the point of burning yourself out. But, while I was working in production arts, I was writing that first edition of the book.
Wow.
And then so that, and just, it was a lot. And then that came out on a publisher, and then and it's the same one. I can't even remember what it's called now. It's been bought out so many times. But I did 3 editions with them, and then they didn't really market the third one very well, I think. And then they're like, well, and I had lined up a sabbatical at school, and I was like, well, they're like, well, we don't really want a 4th edition out of this thing. And I'm like, well, we need it. The industry's changed. And I'm like, I'd always retain the copyright. I'm like, will you give me back the distribution rights? They're like, yeah. So I'm like, okay. So I always say I was like depressed for one day about losing this thing. But then since then, oh man, that was 12 years ago or something. I've been self-publishing it. And that was like the best thing ever. I really don't know. And now I'm not getting rich on it, but I make basically the publisher, if for royalties, you get 10% of the wholesale price. So if you, nobody has a $10 book, but they sell it. If it's a $10 book, they sell it for $6. That means you get 60 cents out of it.
Yeah.
So, and in self-publishing, you set the price whatever you want. There's a print cost, then you keep the rest of the money, and then you could do anything else. Like we talked about, happy to do a book giveaway here. I can just do that because it doesn't cost me much to do.
Right.
Where the publisher,
you don't have to go pay the publisher.
Right. I have to beg them for promotional copies or whatever.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, to me, I think it's just been, and what happened along the line is it wasn't getting bored, but I'm most happiest when I'm like learning new stuff. And I think I didn't really understand this at the time, but I started teaching full time in about 2000 or something. And what was really happening was the industry was maturing and I wasn't learning as much. And then I think by going and teaching full time, which I've always enjoyed doing, I'd have to learn a lot of these things at a much, like I learned way more about electricity when I had to teach it. So, I mean, personally, selfishly to me, it was like the learning of it.
Yeah.
And then writing and stuff, I think explaining stuff it seems to come easily to me. So I just enjoy it. And I'm still doing that now. I'm doing networking workshops and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And that way I get to do all the teaching without any of the dealing with the bureaucracy of anything.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think I always read a lot of stuff and I just thought it'd be cool to write something. And then my mom was a librarian. I think that was factored into it, in terms of that was the culture for me. Was always interested in organization and knowledge and all that stuff.
Yeah. That's really interesting. And that turned into how long was your teaching career? 25 years?
Well, yeah, about 25 full-time, 24 full-time. But I taught at NYU for a while, part-time, and up at Yale for a while, part-time. So on and off for, I don't even know how many years, but the whole time I've still been doing either consulting work or I fell into this niche of like big outdoor sound systems. So I did this Tribeca Film Festival outdoor system for 12 years, I think. And again, we went through the evolution of blind arrays and all that stuff like during that time, but we had like Elton John played on my system and things like that. And when
you say did the system design or front of house, not front of house engineer?
No, I've never been a good mixer.
Oh,
it's the same thing about, I'm not good at concentrating, but and it was but it was fascinating because, for film festival, I didn't even think about it going in, but for film festival, a music concert, if you can't understand the words, it's okay because everybody knows them. But for a film, you have to understand the dialogue. So mine was, as over the years, as the budgets kept getting cut, like lighting would get a little less, whatever. I'm like, okay, what section do you not want to hear the dialogue in the film? They're like, oh, okay. So, and you have to it was in a very kind of crazy, originally on a pier in Manhattan. And this was like a friend of mine just called up and like, we do this thing. And I was like, wow, it's a really busy time at school. I don't know. And then eventually I said yes. And I did that. And then I went on to do things for YouTube and all these things. And then now these were all in like really unusual places. That was the interesting part to me. And then they moved it to, Radio City Music Hall, which is like good friends of mine over there on the crew. But it's sorted. They have it handled. They don't need me for that. So I always liked the things that were like weird and challenging part.
Yeah.
I think that's been the same for everything I do.
So today you don't technically have a job.
No.
You just have lots of different things that you get involved in. Yeah.
I don't know. I seem to just be doing all the things I was doing when I had a full-time job, and I'm without the full-time job, and I'm busy every single day. So
that's awesome.
I am doing some consulting work for like Rational Acoustics and helping on their like training programs and stuff like that. And a bunch of other things like that. And I still have some articles I want to write, just like I have some ideas and I think to me, the writing process is a way to like, I have this idea about like, am I right about this? Is this the thing?
Yeah.
And I kind of go work through it, talk to a bunch of people.
Well, I definitely need an audio blogger for my GearSource site. We're constantly asking, because we get really great lighting blogs, but we don't get good audio ones. So we'll take your hand-me-downs anytime.
No, yeah.
So, the other thing is photography. So I when I'm going through your pages of information that Sarah gave me, I saw the photography stuff, and I mean, that was sort of a career for a number of years as well, right?
I never really. I made a little bit of money on it, but it's just been a passion, I guess,
Yeah.
more than. And when I was a kid, I was really into it, and I think I probably thought about, being a news photographer or something, because I tend to like putting myself in kind of chaotic environments, and
Yeah.
which is and so I did that, and then that's a career I'm glad I didn't pursue, because there's a world like it's impossible to make a living now.
Yeah.
And then after college, I lost darkroom access in the 80s, and I kind of drifted away from it. And then in about, I think it was 2009, I bought a couple little digital cameras over the years, and I bought my first real serious, DSLR. And then I started just like taking it to my friends' shows here in New York and everything. And so I did a lot of that. And then again, there's no money in that. These people they're not making a living, so there's no way to pay.
Yeah.
And that whole world of anything where you can, unless you're, shooting the Beatles or something like those guys, Bob Gruen or whoever.
It's funny because I had somebody reach out to me this week saying, I love your podcast. I'm currently a photographer for realtors. I do realty photography and also drone stuff.
Yep.
And I'm looking to break into your industry.
Oh,
and
tell them
I
to run far away.
Said, stay in your lane.
Yeah.
I just said, stay where you're at. Like, there are a few real mainstay photographers in our industry that seem to do pretty well still. Right. But for the most part, it's just not something that you're going to.
The real estate and weddings, that's the only place to make money in photography anymore.
Yeah, it's true. But
I would say somewhere along in there, I was always interested in storms and weather. And when I was working for Ann Farron, I went, like, we had a hurricane hit Long Island when I lived there, and we had no radar or anything back then. I like drove down to the ocean and just said, let's see this thing come in.
Yeah, your storm pics are amazing.
Yeah, so that's one of my bigger passions now. About the last 15 years, I go out to the plains every year and chase tornadoes, and that's like, I actually find it relaxing in a way, because it's so overwhelming. Like, it's processing so much information, like you can't think about it.
Lightning strike photos that are hitting the is it the Empire State Building, or they're hitting something?
Yeah. Behind me there's a picture. That's the World Trade Center.
That's it. Yeah, World Trade Center. Wow.
And that thing, it scrapes out every storm. It pulls out some bolts even after the storm's over. You can so that's not easy to get the shot, but that's like a reliable place to look.
Yeah,
because otherwise lightning is like impossible to shoot, because you have no idea. But that one actually sold to it. That was in a weather calendar. But that when that gust front came in, I have a huge tripod, but the wind was so strong it blew the tripod over, and I made like $300 on the photo, and the repair for my camera was like $400. So there's no money in it.
Sounds like a good economic decision.
Yeah. But I think, and when I finally saw, it took me a long time to like see my first tornado, and I sort of thought, I can check that off the list, but then it's like, then I'm hooked, So,
now you want to see more.
This year, last year was 9,000 miles in like 3 weeks.
Wow.
That's the most dangerous part, is just the driving. But
last year, so I have a house in Canada and I live in Florida. So I'm really a snowbird now, basically. Right. I'm from Calgary, Canada, and I have a house in Banff.
And I taught a workshop at Banff years ago, and what a beautiful spot that is.
It is, yeah. So I have a house out there that I spend the summers. And last summer, while we were in Canada, our house here in Palm Beach, Florida, got hit by a tornado.
Yeah, I was watching that on radar. That storm.
So, but it was wild because my son's buddy was driving down the road. There's a pretty main road, not like right behind our house by about a half a mile or whatever. And he's driving down this road, and he pulls over on the side because he can see a tornado, and he starts to video it with his iPhone.
Yep.
And he sends it to my son and says, "Isn't that where your dad lives?" And my son goes, "I think so." And he sends it to me in Canada. And he's like, "Dad, isn't this by the house?" And I look at it, and I'm watching it over and over again. it's literally hitting our house
Right.
during this video that this kid recorded. And so we're still dealing with insurance and all this stuff
And that
from
was
this.
I said that was a kind of crazy. I didn't go, but my friends were chasing that hurricane, but that was kind of nutty because that was a real supercell tornado that spun up way east of the east of the storm, because the storm
way
barely
east,
made
yeah.
landfall.
Yeah, the storm was over on the west coast of Florida at that point, and this was there was a string of tornadoes that came through Florida, and I think the worst ones were in Wellington, where we happen to live, and it was just a path. And I mean, you can walk, a mile that way behind me and a mile that way in front of me, and you can just follow the path of the storm that came through. And I mean, we just got to be one of the lucky ones. Basically, it's us, one house on one side of us, and 3 or 4 houses on the other side of us, and that's it.
Crazy.
Like, everything else is completely untouched.
Yeah.
And so we just happened to be in that little path.
Yeah, hopefully nobody was hurt. So I don't think
my girlfriend's son was here, and he thought his mother had told him, go outside and just pull in some planters and stuff so that they don't blow around in the hurricane.
Trampoline.
Even though the hurricane's far away, just pull in some stuff to make sure it doesn't get blown around. And so he goes outside and he sees this thing coming, and he runs back in the house, and he's on the phone with his mom, and he's an adult, but he'd never been in a storm like that. And he's on the phone, and he's like, I think there's something going on. There's a hurricane coming or something. And then all of a sudden the house is just going... And so he's hiding in the laundry room, tucked down in a little ball, because we don't have basements in Florida.
Yep. They say put as many walls between you and the storm.
Just an interior room with no windows. And so he was in the laundry room. And so he was scared to death. I mean, for literally 20 seconds or something. And then it was over. Yeah. And he walked out and he couldn't believe it. There were trees down all over the yard. Our screen was ripped out. Half our roof was gone. Windows blown out, all kinds of stuff. And he was like in this much time, all that stuff happened. So I can understand your appeal.
Well, and you never, the first one I ever saw in Kansas was out. It was a EF4 out at sunset in a field. That's what you want to see. You don't want to see in the town. Yeah. And this is always something we wrestle with, is the human cost of these things, but we're not doing it. And I think a lot of chasers will go and help. If you roll up on some damage, you stop chasing and you go. I mean, obviously you don't want to risk yourself, or there's all kinds of crazy situations, but call things in. And there is a lot of, there's so many chasers out now. Everything's basically live streamed and reported, but something chasing out in the Northeast or in Florida is very difficult. But in the plains, it's you can just watch online, which the Weather Service watches because they can't see the bottom of the storm on the radar. So, but I think we never want to see anybody hurt.
I'll email you after the podcast. I'll email you the little short video from my son's buddy of the one that hit our house. Yeah. So
I saw that was unusual because that's a supercell sort of self-sustaining storm. Because usually tropical storms, it's one band comes in and there's a quick spin up. That's the typical one. But that was it was
different.
Was unusual that way.
It was the whole thing, everything about that whole, was that Helene?
I can never keep them straight. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it was Helene, because it went through Florida and then came back around and went into Georgia and North Carolina, Tennessee, all that stuff. Hooked back around and went and kicked some serious butt. Yeah.
My friends chased that in Florida. I think it was that when they chased in Florida, and then also in South Carolina, the same storm.
Oh, wow.
So, because it
That's
went
crazy.
around,
I can't believe the damage it did in North Carolina. I have a friend who built a brand new house on a huge piece of land with waterfalls on his land, just a very expensive, I don't know, 10 or 12 acre piece of land, or 20 acre, whatever it is, but it's on a mountain, and it's just, and his house is still standing, but waterfall's gone. All the bridges and stuff are gone. It's a disaster. Yeah. It's just
my sister lives in Asheville. So I went 10 days, and we were actually at my father's memorial service when that was all going on. He was 101, so he had a good run. But and she had a storage unit on the second floor of a U-Haul facility down by the river. And I'm a weather geek. I never would have thought twice about that. But the water was so high that it went through the second floor, dumped everything out of the bins, and it was a total loss of all this
Wacky.
stuff.
Wow.
And, when I was there, you had to go to the creek to get, water in a bucket to dump the toilets out and stuff like that. So it's
Unreal.
crazy.
Yeah, when that stuff happens, like I've been here, I moved to South Florida in 1991, right before Hurricane Andrew.
Oh, yeah.
And so my very first, hello, how you doing, with a hurricane was at that time one of the biggest ones that ever hit the United States. And between the devastation, like we actually had a cop come knock on our door because we lived on the Intercoastal. We had a knock on our door saying, I'm sorry, but you have to evacuate. And so, we got on the road, drove to Orlando. It took us like 8 hours to do a 2.5-hour drive to Orlando. We get there, we sleep like an hour after watching the news and stuff. I think we slept an hour, turned around and drove back. But seeing the devastation and the mess and the fact that we couldn't even get into our building where we lived, and then the looting, like, here's this dumb Canadian coming to South Florida. And all I could see on the news was people stealing televisions and stuff out of stores. And I'm like, what is going on? It just felt like total anarchy to me. I'd never seen anything like it. So, it's amazing how powerful some of those storms are.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
I've been in hurricanes, but I'm more like a tornado guy because part of it is that they're relatively small. And then when it's over, you can get out of the way. So you can help if you can, and then get out of the way, because if you're in a hurricane zone and now you're there, you're stuck and you can try to get out afterwards. Like you never want to be a burden on the system. So same, like if it hits you never want to see it hit a town, but if a tornado hits a town in Nebraska or whatever, you can look for people and then just get out of the way and you're gone, and you go stay 100 miles away. Where, that's the rough, but that's, again, we're not, it's not, and I think it's fascinating. It's really the power that's fascinating, because these like supercell storms are as big as Mount Everest, and you can see them from 100 miles away. And I grew up, you didn't see any of that stuff where I grew up.
No,
it's
me
never
too.
the damage you want to see. It's just, but witnessing the power of these storms, I think that's the attraction.
Is there any science to why these storms always hit like trailer parks and stuff?
Well, it's kind of the opposite. They hit lots of places equally, but this is a big sort of controversial thing that but those things just are not built well and they're not anchored. So you have
so
one
they just
storm
get more damage.
a normal, structured house. And this is also a problem with, if they don't bolt the house down properly, that whole thing can go away. But a mobile home is just a horrendous place to be, because in a storm, and these days, the more enlightened places will have storm shelters and stuff for the residents. But no, they don't hit them more, but their survivability is very low in those
Florida.
structures.
It just always seems like, they're the ones that get devastated
They suffer,
by.
as usual. Poor people get screwed the worst in all these situations.
The other thing, like, so you talk about shooting your friends' bands and stuff, and again, on your website, I looked at some of that stuff, and there was some weird looking bands on there. Like, these are all your friends, these weird people?
Oh yeah, no, I
like it.
Yeah, that's the thing I think that's kept me in New York so long, is I hang out with a lot of musicians and circus people and all this kind of stuff. And
really colorful people. Yeah.
Yeah, and I have, there's one, it was just supposed to be last week, but it got canceled by the fire department. But I have some friends that build like crazy instruments that are all on fire and everything. And I have one picture on there. It's a friend of mine who now plays with Go Over It Ella, which is the big kind of touring act, where she has like a fireproof suit on. It sets her whole accordion on fire. And but that was supposed to be last weekend, but they got canceled. But then the good thing is they're actually going to do it again, but do it legally and do everything properly with the fire department. So that's kind of interesting, actually.
Interesting.
But but again, I like being, it's sort of like managing chaos. I think that's it's like being on a storm where it's kind of, I just find that it's not relaxing, but it makes it interesting, where you just have to deal with a lot all at once. And I think when I do that, I can't think of anything else except whatever it is I'm doing.
Yeah. Going backwards a little bit. So with audio, one of the things that I actually learned about on the podcast, because I got the founder of the company on, but there's a brand of line array called PK Sound, which happens to be made in my hometown in Calgary, Canada.
Okay.
And so he invited me into their showroom to see the product, and I didn't know what to expect really. I'm not that much of an audio geek, but the system sounded great. And then all of a sudden he goes, "Now watch this." And he says, "Let's say, suddenly we've got this problem and blah, blah, blah." And the system starts moving. And I just went, "What?" And it's reshaping itself. And I was like, "Get the hell out of here." Like I had this feeling almost like I was standing in the Showco demo room watching lights move for the first time, And, so I don't know. Do you have any feelings about that? Because I tend to get mixed feelings from people when we talk about it. Some people say it's unbelievable, it's cool, but, it adds to the price and weight, and therefore I don't need it. Or like one front of house engineer said to me, in 30 years of doing live sound, I've never once needed to move the rig or to drop the rig to whatever. So
yeah, well, it's interesting because that's it goes along with the same thing we were talking about, like that. I lived sort of through the early days when that. It's funny because line arrays have been around since the 40s or 50s, but not in the form that we've used them. Really, it was like VDOS was the first one that became popular.
Yeah,
and we had those when the Metron Opera tour. I don't know if I mentioned that, but I worked at the Metron Opera for 3 years.
Wow,
somewhere in there. That's where I got my local one card. And we did Metron Opera and New York Philharmonic summer park stores all around, Central Park and all around the city. And so those days we had like early days of VDOS come through, that's a whole other story. But and in those days though, so now though it's a mature thing. And then what's also evolved along with that is the prediction technology is very good now. So now most manufacturers, whether it's Meyer has one called MAP, DMB, I forgot what theirs is called. Acoustics has one. So if you know the venue, you shouldn't really need to reconfigure it while it's being, while it's there. You just have to pin it properly when it goes up. And I think I saw that somewhere years ago. I saw that system, but I haven't seen it used that widely. I think mostly because it's just if you do a prediction on the bus in the morning, especially if you've been to that venue before, you have the information. Because these days, if you know the throw and the angles and the geometry, the space, you put it into your laptop, hit the button, and it tells you what the angles are. And then you go out to the stagehands and go, this box is 1 degree, this is 2 degrees, this is 3 degrees.
Yeah.
So I think it's an interesting solution, but it's probably a problem. You're
fixing a problem that doesn't exist.
Yeah. Then it makes it a little more complicated and stuff like that. But I mean,
their answer to that is that, if something changes, if the barricade gets moved 3 feet further back or 3 feet closer to the stage for some reason, and now you don't have any coverage for the first, 5 or 6 rows or whatever, like just all kinds of things that don't often happen, I guess, is their response to it.
And most, depending on where the PA's hung, if you're downstage of the, the lighting rig or whatever, even if that happened, it's not that big a deal typically to drop the thing in and repin it. I mean, it's not great.
Yeah.
It's not fun, but I mean, it'd probably be possible to do that. But I mean, places like that where I don't know if you could fix that with some front fills or there's some other solutions to that.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it to me, it seems really cool. It's just the more people I talk to, the more unnecessary it seems to be. And how much weight is it adding? How much cost is it adding? Is really what it comes down to.
And there's another, I'm totally drawing a blank. The popsicle came back now. I'm completely drawing a blank in the name of it, but there's a really brilliant guy that made a line array that just always hangs flat and it's all digitally steered. And that's an interesting solution because then every day you just hang it the same and you steer it all digitally. But then the problem is you have to educate people on how to do that. Where I think now, like the prediction array, the rate prediction and the pinning and stuff is like pretty straightforward now.
Yeah.
But if you want to like digitally steer it, it's a whole other thing. So that wasn't really successful in the market.
Yeah. If you had to predict the future, what do you think some major advancements are going to be in audio?
In audio, I mean, what's happening? I think it's. Well, I don't know. There's a complicated answer to that, but I think what you're seeing now, I think the most overused buzzword in all of show everything is immersive. Everything's immersive. It's like, oh, come on, but the speaker companies obviously like anything immersive because you can sell a lot more speakers. So you
So
want
that's
5
just a
arrays.
lot more smaller speakers, right? Is
Yeah,
basically
and
what
there's
you're.
some really fascinating stuff with that. But I have a thing. I have a talk on my website about this that I did for Purdue a couple years ago. But I have a thing I call Huntington's theorem, where if something's affordable and it doesn't catch on, it's not gonna. So when I was at Yale in 1989, 88, we had a thing called Delta Stereophony, which was an all analog steerable sound system thing. And that's basically what everybody has, right? Every manufacturer has a version of that now, which is the big push. It is really cool, but it's been available for a long time. So that's sort of like steerable, movable sound,
Yeah.
idea. That sort of seems to be the trend at the moment. But and again, it's really cool, but I don't know if the audience really notices or if the producers want to pay for it.
Yeah.
But I think in almost everything now, it's like, aside from that, which again, there's some cool applications for that. Like if you go see like a big film production, the Circus or the the Marvel. I don't think that's out now, but they have another one. They do these shows in these huge arenas that they use the entire arena, not just the usual concert stage.
Yeah.
And it's a lot of that stuff is just to track, and it's the people are paying them performers, not the circus performers, but you have no idea where the sound's coming from because there's a character running around on stage.
Yeah.
And you need to localize it so you see that's finally now you're starting to see them. They use like black tracks, and then we'll drive the localization through the system back.
But again,
to
in the bulk
person.
of the market, which is concert touring, I
Right.
guess, maybe because I'm old, but
Right.
I like lots of speakers over there and
Right.
me over here.
Yep.
And
I
want to feel it.
Right.
Even line array bothered me a little bit. It was almost like the hybrid F1 cars, the sound, the screaming sound where it sounds like it's going to blow to pieces
Right.
any minute is part of the experience, And so same with speakers. Like I
Right.
like speakers that are operating at their limit. And
you don't want to push them too hard because then they do sound different. Yeah.
Ish.
But you can do that today.
Yeah.
With it.
But, so line array, I think, has gotten to a point where it's so good right now.
Oh, yeah.
But the immersive thing, I don't know. It's like for me, the difference between listening to music from my big speakers over
Right.
there to listening to music on my AirPods or even a good set of Sennheiser headphones or something, right?
Well, that's, again, this is Pink Floyd was doing quad in 1970, whatever.
Yeah.
And that's my theorem. Like, okay, if that was going to be the thing, it's easily affordable now. If people want to pay for it. It hasn't caught on. So it's not a gimmick. I mean, it is a legitimate thing and it's cool.
Yeah.
But I think it's just like everything now. It's just about, and if you see it even in the speaker marketing now, like D&B just had a new array come out. And what are they talking about? It's smaller and lighter.
Yeah.
So this is just optimization. Like it's doing everything you need now, but we can have a lighter truck pack and, less reading
smaller
points.
and lighter is important in all gear. All equipment is eventually going to be smaller and lighter because, again, when you're getting to every rig has 1,000 moving lights and then Taylor Swift has 3,000 or whatever, like it's just getting ridiculous to a point where it's just like, you're not going to have, like my arena that I used to see shows in Calgary doesn't get most of the shows now because the rigs are too heavy.
I heard you talking about that.
Yeah, the ceiling can't carry it. So they're building a new arena now, but it's crazy how big these rigs have gotten. And so, I think smaller and lighter is kind of important. But I think
the
immersive thing's being tested in Vegas at Sphere, basically, and I'm hearing mixed reviews on the sound.
I think I can say it, but I did the consultant on that project too, not on the audio, but on the show control networking stuff back in 2019 or something.
Okay.
And I think what's more interesting, I give Jim Dolan a lot of credit. There's a lot of things I won't say on here about it.
Yeah.
But I give him credit for making that building happen. Like I thought when the pandemic hit, that was going to be the end of it.
Yeah.
But it's, I'll tell you some stuff off here about the things I know that I can't say about it.
Yeah.
But again, I think that the sound in there, and I've only seen the movie. I haven't seen a concert in there.
Yeah,
but
me too.
And the movie was terrible. That I'll say.
Yeah.
But the sound in there it's interesting, but I'm not sure. I'm trying to choose my words carefully, but mostly it's a giant video experience. And
Yeah.
it's incredible. The scale of it always, I still am baffled how it's successful economically. Do you know about the COSM, COSM?
I think so.
It's a new thing that they have one in, I haven't been yet, but there's one in LA, one in, I think in Detroit, one in Dallas.
Yes.
So that's a Sphere kind of venue, but like 1/3 the size. And then they sell sports stuff in there where they put a special camera like on the end zone. And then they sell food and drink, and you're there with your buddies and you go see the thing. Like that, to me, that sort of scale makes much more sense.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I think, but as from the audio side, I don't think what those speakers do, the holopod speakers do. I mean, it's that theory, the way that hypersonic theory that they're based on, that's existed for a long time.
Yeah.
And they still, I asked them at a demo, they still have, you can't steer low frequencies with that technology. So you can't, the wavelength's too big. So they were like, oh yeah, we're working on that. Well, no one solved that in 50 years. It seems unlikely. So I think a lot of the power of that system is not really used on a concert. Like the whole point of it is that you could have one, Japanese audio in seat A, and then English in seat B, and German in seat C. That's a really interesting application, but you don't want that if you're going to see the Eagles or something, right?
Yeah.
And otherwise, a big spatial sound system, we've been doing that for 40
it's
years,
funny.
so.
You seem to have a similar attitude towards the Sphere as I do.
Yeah.
Where, I'm impressed with what they spent. I'm impressed with how much shit they stuffed into it, how they, like they went for it. And I got to give them an attaboy for that.
Oh, yeah.
But, like I keep going back to, if I was going to get the opportunity to see the Beatles or Led Zeppelin, two bands that I wish I would have seen, I wouldn't want to see them at the Sphere.
Right.
Neither one of them.
They'll just be, but yeah, well, I don't know if, like I said, Zeppelin was my first concert in 1977, but anywhere you'd see them today, they'd be on a massive screen somewhere.
Yeah.
But I think in that place, there's the stage is so far down. It's like this little tiny thing down there. It would just be about this amazing video experience. So
yeah.
But my sister's a big Deadhead. She saw the Dead 30 times or something.
That's one good example.
Yeah. She said, and I saw the Dead once when Jerry was still around at Madison Square Garden with her. But she said that she went 3 nights. She's going back next time.
Yeah.
She said it was the best Dead experience she ever had. And
I can see that and Fish, I can see that making a lot of sense, because those are visual, Pink Floyd would probably make some sense in there.
Yeah.
But it ends there. The list ends there,
Well, I think they're doing EDM things in there now. So I think, there's potential in there, but it's what is it, 17,000 seats? Like that's the fundamental issue to me, where this COSM idea, I think, is really kind of fascinating, because I think that's a few hundred, maybe a little more. Like it's on my list to go. Like that's a scale that makes sense sort of economically, where you can run a football game and make money, and you can sell a lot of beer and you're good, But for 17,000 seats, I guess, I don't know. And it's so, it's such an unusual building, and they have that previs space in, I think it's in Burbank.
Yeah.
You can't just be on tour and like, oh, we're going to make a stop there. You have to make a show for that place. And again, I think it's interesting, but it's a really incredible video experience.
Well, and the other thing that I was talking to a good friend about the other day is the Vegas weather is brutal.
Right.
And what happens when all the video panels start failing?
Yeah.
Like how complicated does that place get when everything starts failing? And also it's Seiko. It's not like so I don't know. Like to me it's a ticking time bomb.
And the idea was they were going to have one there, one in New York, one in LA, but I think I don't see that happening.
Yeah, the economic model just can't possibly work.
They'll probably build one in Dubai, but that's all subsidized, Yeah, I think that's where they're talking about next. But
those guys got FU money. The Arabs, they don't care. Like $1 billion, $2 billion,
exactly.
$5 billion. Let's do it.
Right.
They have all those big indoor ski hills and just all kinds of business models that don't make any sense just because they want it. I want it.
And the other big issue is that just the music industry is so fragmented now that all the old acts are dying out. So that generation is going away. I mean, of course, there's always a Taylor Swift and people like that, but there's not 10 Taylor Swifts. So
Yeah.
I'm not sure what you'd put in there in 10 years, so
Yeah, that's a good point, because I think, Taylor Swift, you got to kind of clip that off, because that's
Right.
sort of a weird phenom. But you get away from that. What pop acts are people going to pay,
right.
Eagles money to go and
Yeah.
see, or U2 money to go and see? And yeah, I don't know, because
I mean, and again, the EDM stuff is like that, but that's not, I don't know. I mean, the visuals be pretty cool in there, but you're stuck in your seat except on the floor. So
yeah,
I'm not sure. I mean, they've done it, but I can't, I can.
yeah, it's the wrong model for that place.
Like we have a place deep in Brooklyn I can see in the distance from my window here called Avant Gardner, and they have every weekend they have 3,000 people in there, and they have this insane laser light, moving light
yeah,
thing, and a DJ.
yeah.
And the that's the stuff. That's where like the that's the
It's
music
a
industry.
big, very expensive planetarium. Is
Yeah.
really what it is.
And
But like UFC, I saw I saw the pay-per-view, and
right,
I thought it was crap. And I thought, if I had tickets to be in there, the money that they spent for, off visibility, like not
Right.
great visibility. The one that I thought was kind of cool was actually the NHL, the draft.
oh, that's interesting.
The NHL did their draft in there, and it was cool because you could see all the
Right.
player stats and all the
Right.
different players available. The screen was put to use, and it was very well designed for what it was.
Yeah, it's
So the player
fascinating.
draft
I wonder,
was kinda
the
cool.
I can't imagine how much they
Me
paid
too. Like,
yeah.
what could the NHL possibly pay
I
to
mean,
be in there?
Well, the NFL, which is based in Manhattan, but they used to go into I'm not sure where they do it now, but they used to go Radio City and remove all the seats, which the prop guys love. But
Yeah,
it's like, at some point, what is that the best usage of your money to like
yeah,
a proscenium theater building? It's the same thing with that. Like, were they putting 17,000 people in there, or was it a TV event?
yeah.
I'm sure somebody cut them a deal for the first time, but is that something going to do that over and over?
Yeah,
I mean, once
yeah.
the novelty wears off.
Yeah,
But yeah, it'd be cool. But that's an awful expensive building for that. So,
it really is. What about you got any AI thoughts?
I know you talk about it a lot. So, it's fascinating. I'm kind of, to me, I think it's interesting. I look at it like, and I've written a little bit about this, but I saw VR stuff in like 1993 or something like that. And I had a lot of people, I was at some conference with Jaron Lanier back then, and he's like, this is changing the whole world. And he's a guy he's totally changed his mind on it. So I thought then that, wow, this has fantastic applications. Is it going to replace everything? No. And that's sort of how I feel like AI, that there's some really cool stuff you can do with it. I don't feel very threatened in our industry with it, because I think, I always say that, if we were going to not have live events, like the pandemic would have been it, like we would just be doing everything virtually, everything on Zoom.
Yeah,
But people want to be in the same building as each other and rub elbows and breathe the same air and whatever. Like that's been going on for thousands of
but
years.
what about
So,
the idea where systems designers are going to go away because AI can do it much better, or console programmers can, AI will be able to do it much better very, very soon, by the way.
yeah, I think that I don't know. The thing is that for an artist or whoever that's going to talk to the person who's going to program it, they want to talk to, there'll be somebody that wants to do everything themselves. Bjork or whatever wants to do something on her laptop. I think she's
Yeah.
into AI or whatever. But I mean, what it's about is a relationship with the person, with a designer. You're
Agreed.
talking about the designer might use it as a tool set to do, I know like you had Bob Bonnier on here, like he had a fantastic explanation of it. And I think in audio, like there's lots of things that existed over the years for this, but the mixing stuff is still a human thing, and you still have to have somebody there every night anyway. So I don't think that's going away, because
Why?
I don't think
Why
Right,
do you
you
have to have somebody there every night?
well, because in the end, especially mixing monitors, the artist needs to go talk to somebody. And also the management has to be like, well, there's a problem over there. If there's some AI mixing it, somebody would have to program it somehow. And music is very
why
complicated.
can't AI do that? Like
I
this
think
is my argument is that, like, even having that conversation. So, I don't know how deep you've got into it at all. You seem like a guy that if you were working a full-time gig right now, you'd probably be incorporating AI because there's so many things that it can do that
Right.
make your job easier. But like, for example, I go for an hour and a half walk every morning or whatever, and I will talk with ChatGPT. I'll actually have a conversation. Hey, I've got this problem. What do you think? What are some options that we can fix this problem? Oh, well, have you thought about doing this or this or this? Well, yeah, I thought about that. But, like I'm conversing
Right.
like you and I are talking right now. And it's
but then
answering
you're
me
also,
and giving me feedback.
yeah, but then you're also hosting a weekly podcast where you talk to humans all around the world every week. So I
Yeah.
think it doesn't replace that. It's just augments that. And it's a way, it gives you ideas and helps you do things. I think it's great.
Yeah.
But I think, also to me, clearly you can spew out some AI music, video, whatever. You can make some slop video that would replace the bottom tier on Netflix or whatever. But I don't know, I don't think people are interested in looking at that stuff because there's some people.
What if you don't know the difference? Because
but I think,
you're not gonna.
yeah, but the issue with that is like, look at the gossip industry. What people talk about is movie stars and whoever, and who's, J-Lo broke up with whatever.
Yeah,
If
that's
it's some,
meaningful.
yeah, if it's some, so they care about the people involved and they want to hear that person goes on, Instagram and or Late Show, whatever, talks about working on this thing. It's about their experience and the people connect with that person as a human. Yeah.
Yeah. Relationships.
There's a big controversy right now with the movie about the architect, where people are, I forgot the name of it, The Brutalist, that there's a whole big controversy because they apparently use, and also AI is sort of like immersive, like, the difference, but there's a lot of people are calling things AI that are not AI.
Yeah.
But they use some
it's
techniques.
a buzzword right now. Yeah.
Yeah, they use some techniques to like clean up some dialect, or like Hungarian dialect or something, and people are all bent out of shape about it. But like, I know about the movie because I saw the actor get interviewed on TV about it or whatever. Or so I think the human aspect of it never goes away. So I have no interest in watching some computer generated anything. And again,
why?
We could have done that.
No, but why if it's really, really good and the storyline is good and the characters that it builds in the movie? But here's the next thing that's going to happen. Like Marlon Brando's family will sell the likeness of Marlon Brando, and you can see a Godfather 5 with Marlon Brando in it or something,
But yeah, that would have to be, you'd have to get Coppola or somebody to direct it to make it interesting to look at. But I would say, the same thing now. That's what you're seeing now with, like, it's not AI, but this ABBA thing I'm going to see next month. Like, that's like licensed by the band because they're all in their 80s or whatever.
Yeah.
That's a way to leverage out this music that people love and have an experience with that.
Yeah.
But it's still like people are getting together to see it, and people came up with that idea. But I think the other thing about, if again, AI aside, which is more powerful than things that existed, but we could have already made animated movies with computer generated dialogue 10 years ago. But look at I'm not a Marvel guy or whatever, but look at all the animated movies, they're all filled with big actors doing voiceover, and they love it. They go and sit in the studio for a day, do their lines, and they're out. But then that's what people go to see. Like, oh, it's so-and-so is in this movie, and they're connecting to that person as a real person.
Younger generations, my son's 20, and he couldn't name an actor for the life of him. He watches movies all the time on Netflix with unknown young actors who are like, insert new guy, insert new guy, insert new guy. And so, I'm a little more, call it either pessimistic or optimistic, depending on your viewpoint. I do believe that we're going to see full Netflix series and Apple series and everybody's series that are 100% AI generated in the next couple of years.
Right. But in that case, how is that happening? Is the AI deciding to make a movie, or is there some person telling the AI what to do?
What I believe is going to happen is old directors, old writers, old even actors are going to sell out. And so a director will basically train an AI model and say, here's my style, here's how I do things. I'm signing off all of the basically directorial rights to my my package of movies or whatever. So you can go look at my skill set on all of those. I'm giving you permission to do that and to basically copy my style verbatim. And so now there will be a John Huntington and there will be a John Huntington /AI or whatever. And so you'll know it's done by the AI. I forget which director example you used, but yeah, you'll know it's done by Coppola or whoever, by an AI version of Coppola. And then I think out of intrigue and curiosity and stuff, people are going to go see it and then compare it to the original Coppola. You know, the real Coppola is better than this Coppola or whatever. But it's going to be better than the real Coppola.
Yeah,
that's the problem.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because I think that if you're correct, which would be a very depressing future for me and trying to go live in the woods at that point. But
we're all going to end up there in the woods.
Yeah, yeah,
yeah.
But I think that's also, I think it's, if you think about like a hit song, and there's a great podcast I listen to, History of Rock and Roll in 500 Songs.
I love that one. Yeah.
Yeah, this guy Andrew Hickey. And again, I think about that. He's on Blue Sky. Like he's. I think of him. That's a personal expression of his. Could you have had an AI like write something like that? It would have been very dry and whatever. But the point I was going to make though is like, and also there's another guy in music, Bob Lefsetz, who has some really interesting stuff. But he writes a lot about
I've read his too.
Yeah. So again, that's a guy. You know, like. I'm relating to him as a person through his material. But anyway, like think about a hit song. If it was possible to just sort of come up with the formula for a hit song, then it would have happened. There's some sort of like human unknown thing in there that I'm doubtful that that's going to be achieved in AI probably in my lifetime. So we'll see. We could wager on something.
Maybe we'll make a little friendly bet on that one because I believe exactly the opposite. I think all hit music is going to be AI generated in the future.
Even now, this is why you should interesting to read Lefsetz about this because like go look at the Spotify top. Part of it's me being old. Like I don't relate to it.
Yeah.
But none of these. You look at the longevity even of those acts, and some of them there is AI slop on Spotify, and you see it. A whole controversy last year with like they would take Frank Sinatra's fake Frank Sinatra and play these old standards, and somebody just sort of listening to background music, but they're recreating what it was, and it's sort of background music for them, but that's not getting popular. That's sort of the low end, sort of.
Well, I mean, I hope you're right, by the way.
Yeah.
So I'm not advocating for any of this. I just believe it's coming.
Yeah. Well, I think it's things like that will happen. I just don't, I think in the end, and maybe because I just like hang around with, like we're saying, like weird, artists and musicians and circus
actual
people.
guitar players. Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm somebody that's worked in this business forever. Like I don't really go to big stadium shows unless I'm working or I have a connection or whatever. I go see, and these are still, live music is fizzling out in the big picture, but I go see my friends play in small venues in New York. But even again, well, this is another good example. I'm just talking about these, like this Avant-Garde, or there's a bunch of these places in New York where there's 1,000 young kids in there till 4 o'clock in the morning with a DJ, but there's still a stage and they're looking at the DJ in the front, a person. Half the time they're not doing anything.
Yeah.
But could they use some AI to generate something? But the kids are there because they're relating to the.
Yeah,
right,
so,
I know, but
so there's DJ software that creates your set based on who you're playing to or whatever, and it's original music.
Yeah, there's not 3,000 kids going to see the AI play live. That's when that happens. That's when I'm like, go live on a desert island.
Yeah, because I mean, at the end of the day, like you said, how do they know that the guy in the mouse head is actually Dead Mouse, the guy
who's actually, and he's a really interesting technical guy.
He is on the
very
interesting
podcast,
yeah. But they don't actually do anything. They just go like this and they touch knobs and they pretend they're doing things, and then they go like this for a little while and then they touch knobs. So are the people there for the atmosphere? Are the people there for the actual music? Or are the people there for the guy who's standing there going like this?
Well, and I think it's the community. I think that's what they're there for.
Yeah.
And I think, and there's another place here, like my friends at Rational Acoustics, they did which makes smart software. They did a training class here, in a little like underground club. And I'm like, I went and helped out my friends of the class. And I'm like, this sounds, I've never heard of this place. You know, I pay attention to all this stuff. And it's a little tiny like underground place called, it's hollow, but it's with zeros instead of O's. And they spent a lot of money, very Spartan looking place, but a lot of money on the acoustics of this building, big sound system. And what was kind of interesting, it's not very big, but they put the DJ in the center of the room. So it's a dance thing. And and this is what fascinates, I think about this all the time. Like, why does everybody do that? Like,
it does kind of make sense when you say it, you know?
And it's like, and I also think you're talking about the sphere, like, when I finally sat in there, I'm like, wow, this should have been a planetarium, because if you put the artists in the middle, everybody would have had that view and everybody would have had the video view, instead of people on the floor see the human thing and everybody else sees the video with a little tiny specks on the bottom.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Really good point.
But this place runs 48-hour weekend parties, and they fly DJs in from Berlin to do it. But I think this is the, like, kids are going to see, like, oh, DJ so-and-so from Berlin is coming this weekend. It's not like the DJ AI laptop software is going to play, we're going to go.
Yeah.
Like, that'll be the background music.
Yeah.
You know, which is fine, you know, whatever. And that's sort of where it just drives artists even further out of the financial equation. But but I think it's the community and that idea. Again, this ABBA thing, I can talk to you a lot more about after I see it, because I stopped researching anything on it. But this is like 3,000 seats. It's been running for 2 years, and they do 6 or 7 shows a week in there.
Yeah, and it's killing.
Again, you could watch that online, but it's not. People go because they want to be in that room. Yeah, and they want to be, you know, even though they know they're watching a video, they don't. I mean, and my friends have told me it's pretty, you know, like, it's a remarkable achievement in terms of the integration and stuff. That's why I want to go see it.
Yeah.
But it's about being in the room with all that and identifying with these humans of this band. So,
well, we have a new podcast coming out. Actually, the first episode is in 3 days on Friday.
Oh, cool.
And it's called Giza Gear Future Tech. And basically what it is when new product is coming out in our industry, still to this day, the only way to really learn about it is to go on to one of the magazine websites or whatever, or get on a mailing list and to read a long press release.
Right.
And so what we've done is we've created an AI podcast.
Oh, okay.
That
I heard you say something about that, yeah.
It tells you about the new product coming from whatever company happens to be the one that sent us that information.
Right.
And it's 2 hosts, and they talk back and forth. It sounds incredibly natural. It might not fool you now that, especially, you know that it's an AI podcast, but give it a listen just because like the logo that we created for it was done on AI. The music was done by AI, and the podcast itself, it's entirely AI. And even there's a part where I speak at the end, which is AI. It's just basically copied and pasted text into an AI copy of my voice. And so the thing is 100% AI, except for Sarah, who clipped and put some things together. But aside from that, it's 100% AI. And I think we're on to something, because I would rather listen to 2 people talk about a press release than read a press release. And so we'll see. You know, we'll see if we get an audience for it or not. We're not trying to trick people. We're not going to create, like, this would be the bad thing, I think, is because I've had people tell me, you got to go create personas for the 2 hosts and give them Facebook pages and names. Now we're just deceiving people. And I don't want to be deceptive. I'm telling people right up front, it's AI. I mean, are we going out and telling people in the audience full on, this is an AI podcast? It's not, unless they figure it out or they hear this podcast of me talking about it. Yeah. So not trying to dupe anyone, but.
And I think you just reminded me of another example where Facebook made these AI people that have been floating around
to start conversations and keep conversations going.
It tanked. Like, nobody.
Well, it's a terrible idea.
Well, but then again, I don't want to interact with a virtual. I mean, there are people that do this. I just personally have no interest in interacting with a virtual, other than, like, you're talking to, you know, ChatGPT or whatever. Like, it's helping you on something you're doing. But to interact with a, like, virtual person that doesn't really exist. And I think too, like, podcasting obviously is a huge, as you know, huge thing. but you have a thing at LDI, like in person, like every podcast I know does in-person events. And like, there's one political one I listened to where they had a thing in DC and I went and met the woman that's on the thing. Like, that's what I remember is like the human interaction I had with this podcast host.
Yeah, you make a good point.
So, I mean, is it useful? Again, this is sort of, VR, like I wouldn't, and I saw it 40 years ago and they were doing AR, they were doing like virtual drum stuff and all. I'm like, this is really cool. Has great applications, gaming, previs, architectural. But I don't think it replaces that live experience or the human experience anyway.
No,
so I think I feel it's the same way.
You've got that right. Like, so I don't think AI is going to replace theater. I don't think it's going to replace live music.
Right.
I don't think it's going to, but when you talk about a movie,
Right.
A movie, unless I really want to stuff Tom Cruise's pockets full of more cash,
Right.
Do I really care if he's the next Maverick or if it's an
we'll
AI
see.
version that's the next Maverick
But that's
or whatever?
what you think about it. Like, he's a good case because the guy has a complicated past.
Yeah.
There's a lot of very problematic.
Yeah.
But I mean, people, he's a movie star, and being a movie star is not just the screen stuff. It's all the other things that come about knowing him. And like, oh, I saw Tom Cruise in this thing. Like, that's the thing, that sort of interaction, I think, is what people value.
Yeah, we'll see, man. You make a very valid argument. And again, I'm not advocating for AI. I'm not hoping that it takes anyone's jobs. I think I'm just being very realistic and preparing myself for the fact that it's trying to bypass me. And I want to do everything I can to use it to a point where I'm harder to bypass.
Right. Yeah. Which I think that strategically it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
I'd say one other thing I think that informs my thinking on this is writing about show control I've been doing it since 1980, whatever, and I'm writing it since the mid-90s.
Yeah.
Over the years, I've had people call up with, like, oh, we want to have you come in and just, get rid of this crew and automate everything. And do that. And that's certainly a way to do it. But in my experience, what happens with most of these new technologies, maybe AI is different, but what happens is that people do more for the same budget. Like, you just have more, and you think about like a theme park is a good example. Like, that theme parks basically exist because show control technology exists. Could you do it? Like, when we first started, we did a haunted house at my school for 20 years. We used to have 6,000 people a year come through this thing. The first year we didn't have any budget, so we had some kids like, when they come through, drop the spiders, pull this rope.
Yeah.
That is horrible job. Like, they hated it.
Yeah.
But machines are very good at that, and that makes it affordable. And that's why you go see, Rise of the Resistance or something like that.
Yeah.
Which is,
that makes sense.
But these technologies basically leverage, and Rise of Resistance is a good example because I don't think they invented anything for that. They just integrated all this stuff really well.
Yeah.
So I think, to me, AI is another tool where we can do even more stuff for the same budget or more, is there somebody that gets replaced? I mean, coder, you mentioned before, like, that's a job that's at risk. Customer support specialist, that kind of thing. Those are not growth
coders
areas.
Is an interesting one because right now, like, if you're a decent coder that has knowledge of coding AI, you've got jobs out the hoop. I mean, there's just thousands, millions of jobs out there for AI coders.
Right.
But you're basically creating, the thing that's going to do that's going to put you completely
those
out of work.
They're probably using AI to, like, I don't want to write this complex syntax, this thing. But
you're replacing yourself. I mean, you're literally creating the product that's gonna kill you.
But again, like, if I'm somebody, a business that needs some software, and again, our business is a good example of this. Like, I was working, I think I didn't even mention, I worked with this company called Thoughtful Designs for this guy, George Kindler.
Mm-hmm.
And I was sitting in the New York offices when PRG was happening. So, the financial guy was like in our office. So I would hear all these conversations. Oh man, I just completely lost my train of thought. Sorry. What were we talking about?
AI, replacing jobs.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
Wow. No, I still
Thoughtful
I was going to
designs.
make a point about it. And,
PRG was overtaking the world and
what was I talking about though? Wow.
I don't know. Replacing jobs, us being replaced. Yeah. Well, that's all good.
Coders. Wow. Sorry. I completely,
it happens.
lost. Yeah.
When, at 50, I think
Yeah,
things just start
Gone.
going, yeah, you know what? You need a little more space for other stuff. I'm
Yeah.
just going to leave now, you
Right.
know? But
Well, as soon as we hang up, I'll be like, oh, I wanted to make that point about the thing. So.
yeah, send it to Sarah.
Right.
She'll edit it. Nah,
That's right.
she
Well, I'll get
probably
the
won't.
AI of me to like make
Yeah.
to make the thing.
You know what? One thing that was very gracious of you, you offered to give away your books to listeners. And so instead of us posting a link, I think what I would like to say is that if you're hearing this podcast and you want copies of these books for free from John, which I think is a very kind offer, send an email to producer@geezersofgear.com or post a comment on wherever you're listening to the podcast, and we'll respond to you on that comment. And John will provide us with links to get those books.
Yeah, so I'm just not. It's not unlimited, just because I'll go broke doing that. But yeah, I have an ebook version, which I have two books. One, Introduction to Show Networking. The other, Introduction to Show Control.
Yeah.
So I can do one ebook of those to anywhere in the world. And
Perfect.
I have one print copy of each one, which is just U.S. for shipping to make it easier.
Perfect.
And I guess
that
Sarah
would be amazing.
will pick one of those people at random.
So whoever, we'll just first come, first serve. So
okay, there you go.
When people come in, Sarah will grab them and give those away, and we appreciate that. And yeah, I mean, other than that, it's been a great 2 hours. I can't believe we've been on for 2 hours here already. So
I'm just getting started on some things.
Yeah, I know. Well, geez, and my brain is like melting because you're too smart. Like most of my guests aren't quite as educated. So,
but I think it just being I'm going to screw up the quote, but Bob McCarthy, who's another person you should have on here, he had a great quote about something, and this comes back to where you're talking about before, about why do you write and everything. But and I'm going to mess up the quote, but basically the idea is like, if you share an idea with somebody, like you get something in return, and now two people have the idea, and that's really interesting. Where if you just sort of keep it to yourself, like you have the idea and it's not as interesting. So I think it's the sharing part is what makes it all interesting.
So true. I like that one. Yeah, well, cool. I appreciate you taking the time today, John. It's been very educational, and I think we could actually do it again at some point if you'd like to.
Happy.
And we can get into even more crazy stuff. But
we should make some kind of AI wager at some point. So
absolutely. I'm ready.
To think of the terms, though.
I'm ready.
I'm ready. You tell me what the terms are.
You tell me, because I think it's going to supersede whatever you come up with as those terms.
Well, and that's like in many fields, though. Like the day we're recording this yesterday, a Chinese AI came out and crashed the market. So
yeah, I talked about it. I talked about it in the intro. DeepSeek.
Okay.
Yeah.
So lots of things can happen.
Roughly 85 or 90% more efficient than NVIDIA. Than ChatGPT.
Right.
So NVIDIA is selling less chips, basically, is what it comes down to.
And I read somewhere, which I don't know if it's true or not, but their model had trained on the other models, which I think is hilarious.
Yeah, eating their children, eating your competitors.
There you go.
Yeah, it's amazing.
They took lots of other copyrighted stuff to eating their models. So
it is literally the wild, wild west, because laws are being created that didn't exist before, and it's just such a new world that's so crazy. And I think by the time we figure it out, these models are going to be sentient, and it's going to be too late. So that's the problem. Yeah. All right, John. Thank you.
Well,
have an amazing day. Yeah.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.